hateful fascism peers out at the country with laser red eyes and a bloody mouth filled with threats and lies, wearing camouflage, anonymous, face masked, carrying handcuffs and pepper spray while brandishing a gun. Today, Trump appears to be backing away from his senior toadies who are still blaming Nicole Good and Alex Preddy for their own executions. And both Democrats and the media are proclaiming Bovino's departure as a victory for democracy. It's no such thing. This is a recalibration. Trump, like Orban and Putin before him, is learning just how far he can go before he and his people encounter resistance that they can't just bludgeon their way through. They're figuring out which messages will work to get us to accept the changes they're making to America and our political and economic systems, including how much they can steal for themselves and their families, and which schemes won't work out for them. This is an old playbook that dates back to Machiavelli and before. It's how every dictator ends up fabulously rich while wielding life or death power. Fascism doesn't arrive with jackboots. It arrives with media and voter fatigue. As the political theorist Hannah Arendt warned, the very banality and ordinariness of such evil is its greatest weapon. Victor Klemperer, a Jew who converted to Lutheranism and then chronicled the rise of Nazism in Germany, saw how average people learned to live with, to adapt to bear the unbearable. In his 1942 diary, he wrote, "Today over breakfast, we talked about the extraordinary capacity of human beings to bear and become accustomed to things, the fantastic hideousness of our existence, and yet still hours of pleasure. And so we go on eking out a bare existence and go on hoping." Sebastian Haffner, another German observer, noted in his book Defying Hitler that even he, a staunch anti-Nazi, found himself one day saluting, wearing the uniform, and marching, and even secretly enjoying the feeling of authority associated with it. To resist seemed pointless, he wrote of himself. Finally, with astonishment, he observed himself raising his arm, fitted with a swastika armband in the Nazi salute, end quote. And Milton Mayer, in his book They Thought They Were Free, described how good, decent Germans came to accept fascism. He was a Chicago reporter who, following World War II, went to Germany to interview 10 average Germans to try to learn how such a terrible thing could have happened and hopefully thus prevent it from ever happening here in the United States. What happened here in Germany was the gradual habituation of the people, a German college professor told Mayer, little by little to being governed by surprise, to receiving decisions deliberated in secret, to believing that the situation was so complicated that the government had to act on information which the people could not understand, or so dangerous that even if the people could understand it, it could not be released because of national security. As Mayer's professor friend noted, and Mayer recorded in his book, quote, "This separation of government from people, this widening of the gap, took place so gradually and so insensibly, each step disguised, perhaps not even intentionally, as a temporary emergency measure or associated with true patriotic allegiance or with real social purposes. And all the crises and reforms, real reforms too, so occupied the people that they did not see the slow motion underneath of the whole process of government growing remoter and remoter. To live in this process is absolutely not to be able to notice it. Please try to believe me, unless one has a much greater degree of political awareness, acuity, than most of us had ever had the occasion to develop. One no more saw it developing from day to day than a farmer in his field sees the corn growing, until one day it's over his head. In this conversation, Mayer's friend suggests that he wasn't making an excuse for not resisting the rise of the fascists, but was simply pointing out what happens when you keep your head down and just assume that ultimately the good guys will win. You see, Mayer's friend continued, one doesn't see exactly where or how to move. Believe me, this is true. Each act, each occasion is worse than the last, but only a little worse. You wait for the next and the next, but of course this isn't the way it happens. In between come all the hundreds of little steps, some of them imperceptible, each of them preparing you not to be shocked by the next. Step C is not so much worse than step B. And if you couldn't make a stand at step B, why should you at step C? And so on to step D. And one day, too late, your principles, if you were ever sensible of them, all rush in upon you. The burden of self-deception has grown too heavy. And some minor incident, in my case it was my little boy, hardly more than a baby, saying, Jew, swine, collapses it all at once. And you see that everything has changed, and changed completely under your nose. End of quote. Everything seems the same, Mayer's friend told him. You still go to work, cash your paycheck, have friends over, go to the movies, enjoy a meal out. The regime even backs down from time to time, making things seem ever more normal. Little victories, you tell yourself. Except, as the German professor told Mayer, they're not. One day he said, you realize that, quote, the world you live in, your nation, your people, is not the world you were in at all. The forms are all there, so all untouched, all reassuring, the houses, the shops, the jobs, the meal times, the visits, the concerts, the cinema, the holidays. But the spirit, which you never noticed because you made the lifelong mistake of identifying it with the forms, the spirit has changed. Now you live in a world of hate and fear. And the people who hate and fear don't even know it themselves. When everyone is transformed, no one is transformed. Now you live in a system which rules without responsibility even to God, end quote. Sound familiar? Consider Stephen Miller's recent musing about suspending habeas corpus to lock up immigrants and even protesters without trial. Quote, well, the Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. That would have sparked emergency hearings a decade ago. Can you imagine if Obama had asserted such a power? Now it's barely a blip. The Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, a blueprint to purge civil servants and replace them with regime loyalists in complete defiance of the Pendleton Civil Service Act and the reasons that that act came into being, should have set off alarm bells. Instead, it got the same treatment Trump gave COVID and his multiple defiances of the law in the courts. Denial, deflection, delay, and eventually acceptance with barely a follow-up peep from the media. It all comes back to normalization. As M. Gesson so brilliantly chronicled in the New York Times, quote, and so just when we most need to act, when there is indeed room for action and some momentum to the resistance, we tend to be lulled into complacency by our sense of relief on the one hand and boredom on the other. Think of the trajectory of the so-called travel ban during Trump's first term. Its first iteration drew thousands into the streets. The courts blocked it. The second iteration didn't attract nearly as much attention. And most people didn't notice when the third iteration of the travel ban, which had hardly changed, went into effect. Now Trump's administration is drafting a new travel ban that targets more than 5 times as many countries. End of quote. Congressional Democrats think they're winning the PR war. They're not realizing that this is a battle within that war, not the war itself. And they're suggesting that they'll only vote to fund DHS and ICE this week to avoid a government shutdown under the following conditions, as Reuters reports. Quote, Democrats are seeking a prohibition on ICE detentions or deportations of American citizens, a ban on masks worn by ICE agents, a requirement to wear body cameras, explicit prohibitions on excessive use of force, prohibitions on raids of churches, mosques, synagogues, and other places of worship, as well as hospitals and schools, and no absolute immunity from prosecution of agents violating codes of conduct, end of quote. You know, it would be a reasonable list if ICE were a legitimate institution worth preserving. And of course, we do need somebody to enforce our immigration laws. But this agency has become so corrupt, has developed such a toxic culture, and has hired so many outright dangerous former felons and open racists that it has to be shut down and replaced. And how about arresting and prosecuting the people who committed the murders that we know about and investigating the ones we've only heard about? And letting that prosecution go right up the chain of command all the way to the top, like it did during Watergate when the Attorney General of the United States went to prison for years. Why aren't Democrats talking like that? You know, if the shoe was on the other foot, Republicans would be. Even if Republicans were to accept all these reforms, and odds are they won't, we'd still be on the same path toward fascism. It would just look more orderly and lawful. And we breathe a sigh of relief, not realizing we just helped the Trump regime with their latest readaptation. When we stop being shocked, we stop reacting. And when we stop reacting, democracy dies. But there is a path forward. The antidote to normalization is outrage and resistance. Not just in voting booths, but in the streets, in courtrooms, in classrooms, in boardrooms, in pulpits, and at dinner tables. Thucydides, who had one of the clearest eyes in history about the dangers faced by democracies, said, "The bravest are surely those who have the clearest vision of what is before them, glory and danger alike, and yet nonetheless go out to meet it." We must regain our vision and resensitize ourselves. We must reclaim our capacity to be appalled. That means when Trump calls Democrats vermin and attacks Somalis like Representative Ilhan Omar, we don't just say, oh, that's Trump being Trump. We say, that's fascist rhetoric. When he promises to use the military against American citizens and sends out immigration officers dressed up like soldiers at war, we don't shrug. We organize and demand an end to the entire rotten undertaking. History won't forgive us for sleepwalking into tyranny, and our children won't either. This is the time to remember that democracy is not self-sustaining. It requires outrage. It demands vigilance. And sometimes it needs us peacefully in the streets with our fists in the air and our boots on the pavement. If we still believe in this republic, in its ideals, and in the sacred value of a free and fair society, then our answer to Trump's authoritarianism must be more than words. It must be peaceful action. Don't get used to fascism. Get loud, get active, get in its way, and demand that our democratic leaders do the same.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by John Pavlovitz. It's titled, If God is Love, Don't Be a Jerk, Finding a Faith That Makes Us Better Humans. This is from the introduction titled, You Had One Job. If you want a good laugh, Google the phrase, you had one job. The results are a hilariously tragic parade of seemingly impossible fails, unfathomably poor planning, and face-palming inducing human error. A piece of melted cheese on top of a fast food burger bun, the word stop misspelled on a street crossing, a keep to the right sign with its arrow facing left, a toilet lid inexplicably installed below the seat itself. It's strange stuff. Seeing these stupefying train wrecks and task execution tends to elicit two responses, usually making you feel a little bit better about yourself while simultaneously wanting to track down the culprits in an effort to understand how they managed to neglect the primary duty assigned to them. We begin to speculate. Were they temporarily distracted? Did they not properly comprehend the instructions? Did they feel as though someone above them in the chain of command dropped the ball? Were they just plain lazy? When people miss the point so spectacularly, we want to know how and why, because that kind of failure feels impossible from the outside. It seems unfathomable to get the main thing wrong, and seeing it happen sparks our curiosity. I imagine Jesus knows well the curiosity that comes with watching people give clear direction lose their way. As a longtime Christian by aspiration, if not always in practice, I often envision an exasperated Jesus coming back, and the first words out of his mouth to his followers as his feet hit the pavement being, "You had one job, love. So what happened?" I wonder what massive wave of excuses and rationalizations would come flooding from the mouths of the faithful multitude in front of him, how they might justify their mistreatment of the assailed humanity in their care, the verbal and theological gymnastics they'd attempt to avoid culpability for their own cruelty. Would they stridently recite him a verse from Leviticus? Would they blame the liberal media for morally corrupting America? Would they talk about people's wicked lifestyle choices? Would they argue that they were loving the sinners in their midst, but simply hating their sin? Would they frantically offer up the same platitudes and parrot back the same partisan talking points that they've gotten used to brandishing on social media and proffering in Sunday school classes? And if all else failed to convince him, would they quote Jesus to himself in a desperate Hail Mary effort to pass the buck to him for what they did or failed to do while supposedly standing up for him? And there, fully seen in the piercing gaze of the namesake of their very faith tradition, with all their justifications and excuses exhausted and only their fully exposed hearts left, would any of their responses be sufficient reasons for refusing to love? When that was the singular task and primary commandment that he left them responsible for tending to? In my less compassionate moments, I admit that I like to picture it not going well for them. I know it's far less than admirable, let alone Christ-like. But some days my heart strangely warms at the possibility of a few billion brimstone-breathing evangelists, sanctimonious conservative politicians, and plank-eyed judgmental Christian neighbors all having to explain themselves in a sanctified flop-swept moment they can't exegete or gaslight themselves out of, and they all get what they have coming to them. But my self-righteous revelry doesn't last long. The mirror calls me out as I remember what I think I know about Jesus, and that rescues me from full-blown, unabated hubris. I begin to wonder what my excuses might be, how I'd spin the enmity I manufacture here, what story I'd come up with for not doing the one task we both know compromises a disciple's job description. And if I really believe what I'm supposed to believe, are any of my justifications sufficient? If God is love, and if Jesus is the perfect expression of that love, and if I'm supposedly trying to follow that Jesus, how could I be so love-impaired so frequently? How do I miss the singular point so consistently? It's not as if I didn't know what I was signing up for, like some lengthy online user agreement I blindly accept in haste, missing the bombshell fine print underneath. Having read the Gospels a few million times, give or take a few 100,000, I know the primary commandment is not something I need to excavate from cumbersome layers of foreign language translations and cultural mores of the time. Jesus himself clearly laid out the most important commandment for me and for everyone who's ever cracked open a Bible, and even most people who've never cracked open a Bible. And so we'd all understand what's being asked of us going in, so there would be no post-altar call buyer's remorse or deathbed claims of a sucker punch, bait and switch. Loving God and neighbor and self is the elemental stuff of Christian prayers, songs, T-shirts, and bumper stickers, and we know that. But as the master Morpheus said to protege Neo in the first and only truly great Matrix film, there is a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. Love is the path that Jesus laid out for us. The book, John Pavlovitz's If God is Love, Don't Be a Jerk, Finding a Faith That Makes Us Better Humans.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, top of the Friday to you. TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak. It is the end of the week, the beginning of the weekend. No guests today, just you and me for 3 hours. Anything goes Friday, whatever's on your mind. We got a lot to talk about. New releases in the Jeffrey Epstein papers were just announced by Trump's former criminal defense lawyer, the guy who went and spent 2 days with Ghislaine Maxwell and then decided to move her into a cushy facility where she could train puppies instead of being locked into a cell. Also, when democracy speaks the language of war, children become collateral damage. We'll talk about that in a moment. Also, Don Lemon arrested for being a journalist after Trump demanded that he be arrested. You know, our little emperor here getting his way, apparently. There's a new nominee for Fed chair. We'll get to that. Also, a new Trump act may lead to the takeover of elections. I don't think Trump is leaving. In the second hour of the program, is Trump building a white supremacist army inside government that will outlast him? Ta-Nehisi Coates says yes. We'll talk about that. And also, is Minneapolis now a papers, please city for non-whites? In the third hour of the program, Mark Carney took a stand against against Trump, and the rest of the world needs to do the same. We'll talk about that. But just to start, you know, the hot news, I suppose, right at the top. Number one, Don Lemon. I'll get to that in just a moment. But number two, also, is this release of files by Todd Blanche, the guy who is obviously in charge of the cover-up here. They got Pam Bondi out of the way because she's become toxic. We don't know what's in the files yet. We don't know whether Donald Trump appears in them yet. We do know that hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of man-hours at the Department of Justice have been spent looking for Donald Trump in the files. Apparently, it appears in the Epstein files more than 14,000 times, at least according to some reports. Whether they pulled every single mention of him, every single picture of him, and we're not going to see a single one, that's my guess, but that's just a guess. So, you know, we'll find out. My daily take at Hartmann report today is titled, "When Democracy Learns to Speak the Language of War, Children Become Collateral Damage." The thing that set me off on this thing yesterday was Thom Hartmann, you know, the bribe-taking border czar. Yeah, he took is alleged to have taken a $50,000 bribe, coming out and saying that his agents are in theater. In theater is a phrase that the military uses for occupation of enemy territory or invasion of enemy territory. Our soldiers were in theater in Iraq and Afghanistan. Eisenhower was in theater when they invaded Normandy, you know, when they stormed the French coast. I don't understand how Minneapolis is in theater. It's an American city. So we've got this language of war. And at the same time, it's being used against people like Liam Ramos, this little 5-year-old kid, Liam Ramos, who was used as bait by ICE in Minneapolis to lure his father out of the house. And now he and his father are in this detention facility in Texas. Now, he didn't come across the border alone. He's 5 years old. He's locked in a concrete cell. It's cold. The food is making him sick. He is sick, according to his lawyer. There's nobody there to talk to him, nobody there to hug him, nobody there to tuck him in at night. The lights are on all night long. How can he even sleep? This is a system designed to drive people insane, and a 5-year-old is in it. Liam Ramos. This kid needs to be freed. I mean, this is just so wrong. This is no longer about immigration. This is about power. I mean, this was Stephen Miller and Thom Hartmann. Their whole shtick 5 years ago was, hey, let's tear the little children away from their families and make them miserable. That will act as a deterrent. You know, it'll cause brown-skinned people to say, maybe we shouldn't go to America. They treat you badly there. And, you know, it's working. People are not coming any longer. It's really interesting. I mean, you know, the border has not changed, right? There's not a new fence there or a new wall or anything like that. The border hasn't changed. What's changed is that when Biden was president, Fox News and about 100 different Republican politicians on virtually a daily basis were broadcasting into Central and South America that the southern border is wide open, come on in. And of course, people did. And as soon as Trump came in, he's like, oh, the border's closed and we're going to throw people in jail, and people stopped coming. I mean, you know, this is the Republican Party creating a crisis that they can then exploit for political purposes. And in the process, locking a 5-year-old in jail, in a prison, in a private for-profit concentration camp in Dilley, Texas. This is just wrong. And then we've got this war language that Homan is using, his in-theater language. Nixon taught us what happens when you use the war language. He declared a war on drugs. Remember that? The war on drugs? Dan Baum interviewed John Ehrlichman, his right-hand man. His official title was domestic policy chief. And Ehrlichman said, and I quote, "You want to know what this is really about? The Nixon campaign in '68, the Nixon White House after that, had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people." You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to either be against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt their communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. See, the language of war allows a whole bunch of things that are generally not allowed without the language of war. Suffering, it's normal in war. You know, the collateral damage, unfortunate but acceptable. People caught in the middle stop being human beings. They start being obstacles to be managed or broken, or in the case of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, killed. Or in the case of little Liam, 5-year-old Liam Ramos, imprisoned. And he's one of hundreds of children that Trump and Homan have shipped off to Texas and other so-called detention facilities, concentration camps, right here inside the United States. This is absolutely unnecessary. I told you this story about a friend who was deported during Obama's administration. ICE agents showed up wearing windbreakers, you know, like FBI agents do, just dressed like normal people. They had badges, they had identification. They said, you're in this country illegally. You've got, you know, we're giving you a month to get out of here. I believe it was a month. It might have been a few weeks. We're giving you a certain period of time to get out of here. We reached out to Bernie Sanders' office and tried to get him involved. He reached out to ICE. They said, no, we're not going to, you know, there's nothing you can do. And that person, that illegal immigrant, and his wife, who's a friend of mine, are now living in Mexico and have been for, almost I think about a decade. I mean, this happened during the Obama administration. During the Obama administration, ICE wasn't dressed up like they were soldiers coming out of Fallujah. They were dressed the way FBI agents dress. I mean, this is just crazy. And Obama deported more people than Trump has in every single year. Even last year when Trump was going full tilt boogie deporting people, Obama deported more people. And he did it without smashing windows, without killing people, without shooting people in the back, without, you know, so, you know, we've got this, we have a terror going on. By the way, war on terror, same thing. When George W. Bush declared a war on terror, what did we do? We lost our civil liberties, the Patriot Act. So this is enforcement doesn't require cruelty. This is about how language can shape policy, and policy shapes systems, and systems shape societies, and they're trying to change America, turn us into a police state.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And they seem to be having some considerable success. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Jerry in Venice, California. Hey, Jerry, what's up?
Yeah, I think this might be the end of the Reagan Revolution. You know, remember in '67 when Reagan said that parents didn't send them to Berkeley and San Francisco to learn about free speech? And every freedom starts with free speech.
Yeah.
And then when he becomes president, he turns Central America into a toilet. They all show up here. And that was fine because
who's they?
The people from Central America
because Reagan went in there and disrupted their countries.
Right.
Yeah.
And then all the cocaine showed up.
Yep.
I spent a lot of time on the Mexican border in Nogales, and it was like snowing in May.
Yeah.
And
well, there's also the allegations that during the Reagan administration, the CIA was involved in importing cocaine into the United States.
Oh yeah,
to pay for guns that they were shipping down to the Contras, all illegally.
There was two people in Nogales you didn't know. You didn't want to know the dealers, and you didn't want to know the feds, because if they needed a fish, it didn't come out of their pond. So during the summer of love, when I was at Fort Knox, or not at Fort Knox, but at Fort Ord in 67, and these people that were speaking this free speech, because we couldn't. We were in the military.
Right.
They were speaking for us. And what happened with George Bush and his wars in North Africa just did the same thing that Reagan did to us by sending all these people north into Europe.
Yeah.
Basically, that's what happened.
Yeah, no, I get it. And that's what Orban and Putin used, by the way.
That's right.
To acquire power. Viktor Orban, when he ran for president in 2010, his campaign slogan was "Build a Wall," and he actually built a wall along the southern border of Hungary to keep out the Syrian refugees. No, you're absolutely right, Jerry. Thank you. That was a great analysis, and thanks for the history lesson. Good talking to you. Al in Zanesville, Ohio. Hey, Al, what's up?
Hi. Maybe a little change of topic, but. For years we've been looking at the right versus the left, and all of a sudden, why do we think they're so stupid? And this goes back and forth. And I have, daily exchanges on Facebook with some of these people. And I think I've kind of come up with an idea. I think most of us start out conservative. Conservative deals with what is happening to you, and you base that on events. In order to step out of that, you have to do a thought process. You have to start thinking, analyzing, and looking and applying your morals and your values to what's happening. And eventually, I think you say, now, wait a minute, this is what we should do. And then you can analyze that. And I think the difference in the left is they don't make that step. They stay in line. They stay lockstep.
Who's
and they don't bother the right.
People? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable analysis, Al.
I mean, those people, they go by slogans, so they don't have to think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty simple, but I think it's.
Yeah, and the Pied Piper of the whole thing back in the day was Rush Limbaugh, but now, and it continues, of course. Al, thank you for the call. Spot on. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. They called it blood libel, what the Germans were doing against the Jews, claiming that they were using the blood of Christian children to make their matzah. We've got a new blood libel now here in the United States. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump lying through their teeth, arguing that black Haitian immigrants to the United States, legal immigrants with green cards in this little town in Ohio, are eating pets. And this is another libel that goes way back. In the 1890s, people were claiming German and Dutch immigrants were eating pets. Then they claimed in the 1880s, and actually as recently as last year, a restaurant got shut down in California because of claims that they were serving pets. They weren't. But it was an Asian restaurant. This is just evil stuff, these lies and spreading this kind of hate. And this is now the strategy that the Republicans are using. There's a whole article about it at HartmannReport.com, Hate as a Political Weapon. Check it out.
There's a light that never shuts off in a room made out of stone. A little boy is counting shadows, trying not to feel alone. He didn't cross no battlefield, didn't break no law he knows. He just woke up one morning and they took him from his home. Bring home Liam Ramos, he's just a child, not a war. You don't build a nation stronger by leaving kids on a cold floor. If mercy still means something, if justice still has a name, bring home Liam Ramos, don't dress this pain up as a game. They talk about invasions like they're talking about a fight, but it's a 5-year-old crying under fluorescent light. They call it duty, call it order, call it keeping us secure. But there ain't nothing about a cage that ever made a country pure. Bring home Liam Ramos, don't call cruelty the law. There ain't no thread in a teddy bear curled up against a wall. If we still know right from wrong, if we still feel shame, bring home Liam Ramos, say his name. Every war needs an enemy, every lie needs a face, but you don't get to steal a childhood just to prove who's in control of the place. Bring home Liam Ramos, say it slow, say it loud. History's listening right now, and it's not impressed with how we traded love for language and mercy for a claim. Bring home Liam Ramos, we'll all wear the blame.
23 minutes past the hour. The FACE Act is the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, FACE. It was passed back in 1994 during the Clinton administration. And the essence of the FACE Act is that you may not prevent people, you may not disrupt abortion clinics, basically. This was passed by signed into law by a Democratic president. This was during a time when the anti-abortion people were getting increasingly violent. Multiple people had been murdered by them, and they were using violent tactics to disrupt abortion clinics. And when the law was passed, somebody slipped into it a sentence that says, in addition to healthcare facilities, which of course meant the abortion clinics, in addition to healthcare facilities, churches are also protected under the FACE Act. Now, the FACE Act makes it a 10-year in prison felony for disrupting a health facility, ... or a church. So, January 18th, this is, about, 2 weeks ago, anti-ICE protesters entered the city's church in St. Paul, Minnesota. This is a church whose pastor is apparently a local ICE official. And Don Lemon came along to film the thing and to interview people as a journalist. Now, the First Amendment explicitly protects journalists. And the First Amendment is something that, the equivalent of it in Russia was one of the first things Putin took down. And of course, now that Trump has put Putin's picture up in the White House, he's doing everything he can to turn America into Russia. And so the First Amendment has to go, right? So they tried to go after Don Lemon, first off, in federal court. A federal magistrate in Minneapolis said, no, I'm not going to indict this guy. So they busted him in Los Angeles. And, this is a, shall we say, a novel and controversial interpretation of the FACE Act, that it can be used to arrest journalists. But Miles Taylor, who's been on this program a number of times, the former chief of staff over at the Department of Homeland Security, published a piece this morning on his Substack newsletter claiming that this is the beginning of the Trump administration's crackdown on alternative media. Because Don Lemon is no longer with CNN. He's basically doing everything off his Substack page. He's got a Substack page, The Don Lemon Show. It's got about 113,000 subscribers. So, you know, he's probably making enough money to live on that way and to run his little, you know, his program. And God bless him. But this, I agree with Miles Taylor. I think this is the Trump administration saying, you know, if you don't work for a big company, we're going to come after you. This is like when Viktor Orban in 2010 started arresting people for posting things on Facebook. I'm sorry, it was 2020. Started arresting people for posting negative things about him on Facebook. This is, oh no, you're not a journalist. You have no protection. No, we're going to come after you. So, you know, get ready. We'll be right back with your calls. What's on your mind today? It's Anything Goes Friday.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Speaking the truth, J.D. Vance would really rather you didn't know all about. I'll be right back with your calls. Today we're reading from Behold America by Sarah Churchwell, The Entangled History of America First and the American Dream. This is from the prologue. On Monday, 30 May 1927, a cool day with showers forecast, New Yorkers were gathering for the annual Memorial Day parades around the city. It was only 9 years since the end of the European War, into which America had been so reluctantly drawn and Europe had suddenly become closer than ever before. Precisely 10 days earlier, Charles Lindbergh had completed the first solo flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis, and no one had yet stopped celebrating. Front pages around the country reported that Lucky Lindy had been mobbed in London, greeted by rapturous crowds of 150,000. Few Americans were talking about much else than the newest national hero, but in New York that day, different kinds of mobs were about to gather. Around 8 a.m., a group of Italian immigrants living in the Bronx set out for the elevated train on their way to Manhattan to join the parade. But they were not going to honor the American soldiers who had died in the service of their country. They were supporters of Mussolini, planning to join 400 American fascists who were marching in Manhattan's Memorial Day parade as part of the official fascist movement in the United States. They had been invited by the parade's organizers, to the outrage of many anti-fascists, including Italian nationalists and anarchists who threatened violence if the invitation wasn't rescinded. It wasn't. Like all his fellow fascists intending to march that day, Joseph Carisi was wearing the black shirt uniform, sporting leather boots, jodhpurs, a black cap, and carrying a steel-tipped riding crop. When he stopped to buy a newspaper, Carisi was jumped by two men, stabbed in the neck, and left to die on the sidewalk. Another fascist, Nicholas Amoroso, who was running either to catch up with his group or away from the killers, reports vary, was shot 4 times, once right through the heart. One of the 2 murdered men had served in the American Army during the Great War. The other with the Italian Army, papers reported. The parade they had meant to join took place without them, a fascist delegation of several hundred that was guarded by police to, quote, avert disorder. After the parade, the American blackshirts returned to their headquarters in the heart of Times Square. There, another of the fascists standing outside was set upon by 3 men. He defended himself with his riding crop as his fellow blackshirts charged out, brandishing clubs and whips, chasing the assailant through the theater traffic in Times Square, who fled as the black-shirted mob tore through the traffic. 100 fascists, reported the New York Times, rushed the attackers. A melee ensued that was quickly dispersed by the police. There was also violence in Brooklyn, where a parade of fascisti marched from the Angelo Rizza Fascista League at 274 Troutman Street in Bushwick. The LA Times reported several hundred men were parading, including 40 or 50 in the black shirt uniform. Fights broke out between supporters and protesters mingling on the sidewalks, and an anti-fascist was found lying on the ground, stabbed in the back. He survived and identified a fascist as his assailant. Accompanied by 30 police reserves to forestall violence, the marchers made their way through Brooklyn, stopping at the Wilson Avenue station, where the fascisti came to attention and gave the fascists salute. They ended at a Roman Catholic church, where the priest blessed them under large American and Italian flags, while the police remained on guard.
The biggest outbreak of violence that Memorial Day, however, occurred in Queens, where it centered around a different right-wing group, not Italian Americans, but the self-proclaimed 100% American kind. By 1927, the Ku Klux Klan had spread across the United States since its rebirth in Georgia 12 years earlier. The first Klan was formed in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, as former Confederate soldiers in Tennessee created a secret society to promote white supremacism, and terrorize the newly freed slaves in the South during the Reconstruction era. The name is generally believed to have originated from the Greek word for circle, kuklos, while Klan pays homage to the mystified Celtic heritage supposedly shared by white Southerners. Within a decade or two, the first Klan had been successfully suppressed by law enforcement and died out by the turn of the century. But in 1915, it was resuscitated in Georgia, and by the early 1920s, the second Klan had achieved a powerful political presence in the United States, not only in the South, but across the country. I would add this is because of 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation came out. The Klan had an active presence in New York City and Long Island by 1927, with favorite slogans, which they even attempted to copyright at various points. That year, the Klan was calling attention to the fact that it first announced the program of 100% Americanism and of America First. They were not, in fact, the first to adopt these mottos, as this book will show. In 1927, both phrases had been around for a decade or more. But as far as the Klan busily copywriting hate was concerned, America First belonged to them. And on Memorial Day in Queens, 1,000 or so of them had gathered to march, many in white robes and hoods. They were accompanied by 400 women from the so-called Clavana, the feminine branch of the Klan. Some of the reported 20,000 spectators in Queens that day objected to the Klan's presence, as others defended their right to march. Scuffles broke out, and it turned into a riot. Women fought women, and spectators fought the policemen and the Klansmen as their desire dictated, said a newspaper. Klan banners were shredded, and 5 of their number were arrested, said initial reports, while a few others were caught up in the confusion as well. The book, Behold America, Sarah Churchwell.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
He raised his hand, not a fist, just a voice. Said, I'm Senator Padilla. I've got a choice to ask to speak, to represent my state. But boots hit the floor, and it was too late. Thrown to the ground by the men in black, while the cameras rolled and they stepped back. Fox News smiled, Christie lied, said she didn't know him while justice died. The police state is not coming, it's here. When truth gets silenced and protests disappear. When power punches and no one blinks, and freedom's hanging on the edge at the brink. It's not a warning, not a fear. The police state is now, and it's crystal clear.
35 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. So I just want to emphasize the importance of Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, the chief spy master for the country, showing up in Atlanta, Georgia, the source, the place where the majority of the Democratic vote in the state of Georgia, the black vote, the majority of the Democratic vote in Georgia comes from, and raiding this warehouse and taking all of these ballots to God only knows where, to do God only knows what with. Joyce Vance, the former prosecutor, says, quote, the Fulton County search warrant and its implications for 2026 and future elections is the most important news out there right now and not getting the coverage it merits. And she goes on to say, that's the fear. She said, Trump is famous for caring only about the investigation, not what comes from it. She said, that's the fear. This is Trump's roadmap for corrupting elections in 2026 and beyond by casting results into doubt, seizing ballots, parlaying them into Republican control of election machinery. There are good reasons for concern. She wraps it up. She says, if Trump gets away with seizing Fulton County's ballots from the 2020 election, there's no reason to believe he'll stop there. He will try to do it everywhere he thinks might benefit him. For him, it's not about the will of the voters. It's about what Trump wants. Of course. So what's on your mind today? Russ in Hickory Hill, Illinois. Hey, Russ, thanks for listening to WCPT. What's up?
Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, you know, Tom, you kind of took what I'm going to say. We win in 2028, 2029. Should we just up the ante? I mean, we go just as hard as Trump. You know, okay. All the red states, keep your dollar. We're cutting your funding off. There's 2 million immigrants today, they were saying in Texas we should be going after. Abbott, we're coming in your state and just going to bury you with this stuff. You know, Tom, I don't know if you mentioned this. He's suing the IRS for $10 billion, and they think they're going to give it to him. For what? Releasing his taxes?
Yeah, I saw.
You know, Tom,
I was going to. In fact, I had put that on the. I thought I'd put that on the one sheet for today's show. You're right.
I'll
Russ.
tell you something now, Tom. His whole family's got to be sued for about $500 billion. And I'll tell you what, I'd like to strip his son-in-law and daughter. You're no longer citizens, and ship them to Saudi Arabia and tell them you can have these two.
Well, his daughter is an anchor baby.
Well, let's be frank, Tom. Melania's got to go too, and her son. She's just corrupt with this stuff. This $40 million they paid, they'll make it back. It's time, Tom, and I'll tell you what, Steve Bannon, all these guys, you know, Chelsea Gabber, Kennedy are low-hanging fruit. These two will definitely. They were saying it today. John Foog was saying. The girl from South Dakota, Gandhi, they're all going to take it in the face, and he's going to laugh and leave them.
Well, I suspect he's going to pardon them on the way out the door, but you know, God.
Yeah, but you can't pardon a lot of these for a lot of things, Tom.
Yeah, you can't pardon for state crimes, and that's the one area where I think there's considerable hope. Russ, thank you. Well said. Regina in Chicago. Hey, Regina, what's up?
Good morning, Tom.
Hey.
I'm trying to hold on. Okay, I'm trying to hold on. I wanted to call you today to remind you. This Don Lemon thing has really upset me. Yeah. Okay, so the room that I said I was going to prepare for you, I can start painting it and getting it together because I consider you a journalist. I consider you our hope. You help so many of us with your radio show.
Well, thank you.
But people have really got to get with it and remember the type of people we're having to deal with. These Republicans have been at this for years. And when I was in college and then coming out and getting ready to start my family and this, that, and the other, you know, I was wandering around, wasn't really thinking about certain things. But I do remember starting to pay attention back when the Republicans killed the electric car in California. That was back in the 70s. Yeah. And then when Reagan got in office, you know, these are things that started waking me up. And I think that a lot of people today are not, for some reason, they don't want to believe what's happening in front of them.
Yep.
I don't know where they think they're going to go. or what's going to happen.
Maybe Canada, I don't know. But yeah, there is a lot of denial going. I mean, this is how fascists take over countries. This is how Orban did it in Hungary. This is how Putin did it in Russia. The fact of the matter is 80% of the population just never really pays that much attention to the news. And you know, their lives are not all that affected by fascists.
That's what upsets me the most. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So like I said, you know, I can get everything together. You know, we got to get our secret code and all that kind of stuff.
There you go.
You can come and you can broadcast out of Chicago.
Okay.
We will embrace you and keep you safe.
Well, thank you, Regina. Thank you. It's more likely I'm going to need a spot in Portugal, but you know, and actually I have a friend in Portugal who has offered me one, but I'm going to stay right here. We're not going anywhere. We're going to stand our ground, as it were, and fight back. Regina, it's always so nice to hear from you. Thank you so much for the call.
Okay, Dave.
Yeah,
take care.
Good talking to you. Tim in Portland. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I'm calling about propaganda and how it works.
Okay.
You know, people talk about, you know, nuance and whatnot and language. Propaganda is not nuance. It's catchphrases and things like that.
Yeah, it's really kind of a subset of advertising and marketing, I think you could argue. Speaking of which, by the way, Louise and I watch TV on Sling, and starting about a week ago, every morning after, you know, we watch, like, you know, Morning Joe will turn it on while we're doing show prep. And when the program is over, Sling logs us out of MSNBC and logs us into Fox. And suddenly we're watching Fox News without any, you know, Fox has got to be paying Sling for this. I mean, this is just horrible. Anyhow, back to you, Tim. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is. So here's something that really bothers me when I listen to your program sometimes, is you keep saying voter suppression. That's for intelligent people, okay? Mm-hmm. So we need to change
call it stealing your vote.
The language.
Yeah, stealing your vote.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Well, what I came up with was institutional voter fraud. Start calling it voter fraud, because what they're doing is voter fraud. It's not suppression.
Well, no, what they are constantly claiming voter fraud, like it's the fault of individuals, specifically
right.
Black individuals.
And you turn that on.
What really they're committing is election fraud, and that's what it should be called. I get it, Tim. I get it.
Correct.
Or that they just want to steal your vote.
So,
they just want to steal your vote. This form of election fraud is stealing your vote, or discourage you from voting. It's like, you know, Greg was talking about yesterday. For Black people in Georgia, typically you have to wait in line 6 to 10 hours to vote. White people, I lived in Georgia for 15 years. And I lived in 2 different white suburbs, in Marietta and in Roswell, and I never spent more than 15 minutes in line waiting to vote. But, you know, go down the road where there's Black people, and suddenly it's a 6-hour wait to vote. That's set up. That is established by people like Brad Raffensperger, the chief vote purger of the state, the Attorney General, or the Secretary of State, rather. And, you know, it's a deliberate strategy to prevent Black people from voting, because they're principally Democratic voters. But Tim, excellent point. Thank you very much for making it. Mark in Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Tom. I was listening to you yesterday when you were had your Phil Eichmann
Phil Ittner from Ukraine. Yeah.
Yes, and was it you or Phil that said that there is a reason to believe that Russia is now using Starlink to guide their missiles? And,
I pointed it out. I read it in the Financial Times. It's all over the media. You can easily Google it. That they're getting bootleg Starlink systems. Apparently, a lot of them through one of the Middle Eastern countries that's giving Donald Trump billions of dollars. And they're using these to guide their missiles to be very precise, to destroy the power plants in Kyiv and other parts of Ukraine.
So isn't Starlink being funded by our government?
Yeah.
And aren't we now basically financially supporting Russia's efforts by that?
You could make that argument, I think, yeah.
I'm gobsmacked that this isn't more on this. I didn't try to Google it. I just I've given up on watching news. I listened to you and a few other programs on Sirius XM. The news is just too damn depressing. But I had not heard that it was widely being mentioned through the media.
Yeah, yeah. It's not hard to find the story, Mark. Like I said, I caught it in the mainstream media, over the last couple of days. It's kind of grim, and they're killing people in Ukraine. I mean, this is a war crime. Freezing civilians during a winter is a war crime. And Trump says he called up Putin and said, pause for 5 days, right, or for a week. Well, what that tells you is that Trump's in it with Putin, right? Trump and Putin together are attacking Ukraine. Mark, I got to run. Thank you for the call. It's 46 minutes past the hour. Anything Goes weekend.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. Keno in Lakeland, Florida. Happy Frias Day, Keno.
Happy Frias Day. She heard her name being called. She's here to help us spread love in this United States once again so the mother's milk of human kindness can flow through America. It's happening. And here's the good news. There are some Republicans in Congress, in the House of Representatives, that they want to get away from the reckless wreckers that the Republican Party has come under MAGA control. And so we're going to form a new coalition now called the Recommended Coalition with, a double meaning, W-R-E-C-A, the wreck that has the Republican Party has become and is wrecking our democracy and wrecking our economy through tariffs. And so the Recommended Coalition. Now, the Democrats need to put up at least two people that these Republicans that want to come over and cooperate now with the Democrats. I recommend James McGovern of Massachusetts in Congress and Eric Kilmer there in he's going to retire this year. They worked in the bipartisan committee in previous years that I worked with them.
These are Republicans?
Excuse me?
These are Republicans, Keno?
No, these are the Democrats.
Okay.
The Democrat Party has to have a coalition or contact people, liaisons, that the Republicans that want to come over and cooperate now that need who they can come and contact and know definitely who they can contact. I recommend McGovern and Kilmer because they've worked with the bipartisan committee in the past. That's the beginning. Now, we want to put in Don Bacon as the Speaker of the House this year. He's got experience at a high level. He was a former Air Force general, and so he's going to help us through these trying times.
Is he not retiring? Isn't Don Bacon retiring?
Yeah, he said he's going to quit this year. Yeah. But that's why we need him. That's why we need him. If we can make him,
because he can be an honest broker.
Yeah, and Bryant Fitzgerald used to work for the FBI. He's a congressman in Philadelphia. He can help organize these Republicans that are going to join the Recommended Coalition. So now, and people start being aware that the mother's milk of human kindness will flow, and now I'm writing a movie script for something, and this is idealistically in the movie, an old demented president, and eventually his daughter would be the one that brings the mother's milk of human kindness and leads him off the stage and tells him, "Daddy, it's time to retire. Conditions are, your mind is getting bad, and it's time for you to retire." So Ivanka could bring the mother's milk of human kindness to this country, but this Recommended Coalition has got to work together, and we can pass an immigration bill this year that Republican from Oklahoma had it, and get this immigration question off the table. Tom, you've said that. You've advocated. We've got to get this immigration issue off the table. So we
get it resolved with a good piece of legislation. No, I get all that, Keno. Keno, you when you first started calling into this program, you were a Republican, and so I'm guessing that you have friends or acquaintances, neighbors, whatever, who are Republicans. What are you hearing from them about Trump?
The news. The good news is a lot of Republicans are trying to say the Republicans are wrecking everything under Donald Trump and MAGA, and it's the reckless wreckers. They want to disassociate from the reckless wreckers and join with the Democrats, but it's got to be made a way for that to happen and organize.
I get it.
McGovern and Kill start.
Keep thinking, Keno. That's great. I appreciate the call. Thank you so much. It's 10 minutes before the hour. I'll be back with you in 1 minute, and we're going to check in with KTNF, too, to get an update on what's going on in Minneapolis. Stick around. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. When Ronald Reagan took over America in 1981, we handed him a brand gleaming new country. Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Dwight Eisenhower, Jack Kennedy, they had built America. We had brand new schools, brand new hospitals, brand new interstate highway systems, brand new airports, infrastructure. We were the envy of the world. And then Republicans came along and they said, well, you just cut the top tax rate from 74% down to 27%, and everything will trickle down. Instead, what do we get? Billionaires and poverty. They said, hey, just deregulate guns. And an armed society is a polite society. Instead, we've got more school shootings than anywhere in the world. They said, just kill off civics and history classes in our schools and it'll liberate our young people to focus on science and math. And now we've got people who don't know how our government works. I mean, it just goes on from there. There's a whole rant about it over at HartmannReport.com titled FDR Saved America, Then the GOP Ripped Us Apart. Check it out. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Well, actually, first, John Parker's on the line with us, host of The Gailey Show over at KTNF, our Minneapolis affiliate, AM 950. John, what's the latest from Minneapolis?
Good morning, Tom. Thanks again for having me. So there is a strike happening today, not as big as last Friday's strike, but we do have about 100 businesses locally that are closed. There are dozens more that instead of closing are offering food or services to folks today because they couldn't afford to be shut down. We've also been tallying about 50 cities, over 50 cities across the U.S. also have some businesses that are closed today in solidarity with our strike. We've also had hundreds protested this morning outside the Whipple building where ICE is operating.
It's your federal
to get them to drop the charges. Correct, yeah, to get charges dropped against the 16 people that Pam Bondi arrested 2 days ago on Wednesday. There's a lot of protest happening right now, and I want to lift up Georgia Fort, local journalist who was arrested this morning.
She was arrested with Don Lemon. She and Don Lemon were the reporters at that church, right?
Yes. There was also another individual who works within the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, but wasn't involved with any of the investigations that office was doing related to ICE, was more a liaison, as I understand it, to the legislature and is actually running for office. But Georgia is a 12-time regional Emmy nominee. She's won 3. She founded the Center for Broadcast Journalism, which actually focuses on creating pathways to journalism jobs for people of diverse backgrounds. That center also runs and owns Power 104.7 FM. And the crazy thing about this, I mean, there's a lot of crazy things about this, but she was actually covering the story and advocating for Mario Guevara, who was also an Emmy Award-winning journalist with a legal work permit in the U.S. He was arrested last June covering a No Kings protest, and they shuffled him around, Trump and ICE, 6 different ICE detention centers over 4 months before deporting him, to his native El Salvador, not to the concentration camp, to the country. He's the 4th longest person who had been incarcerated, fourth longest journalist incarcerated in the U.S., leaves behind 3 kids, a wife, 2 kids are U.S. citizens. 1 is being treated for a brain tumor. So the charges the DOJ is alleging for Georgia Fort is interfering with the rights of religious freedom in a place of worship. So we'll see what happens there. But Minnesota Press is understandably up in arms already. The Star Tribune, Public Radio, Minnesota Reformer, Minnesota Spokesman Recorder have all put out joint statements condemning what happened this morning in relation to Georgia Fort. Also want to mention that tomorrow is a big day against Target. A lot of actions taking place against that company. The data is significant because its new CEO, Michael Fidelki, takes over this weekend on Sunday. So he had been serving as the chief operating officer. And Target is the 4th largest employer in Minnesota. And since Operation Metro Surge began, Customs and Border Patrol assaulted and kidnapped 2 citizens in one of their stores in Richfield. Witnesses have been reporting that Target allows ICE to stage operations in their parking lots. And last year, we all know this, right? Target gave Trump $1 million for his inauguration campaign, rolled back all of their equity and inclusion initiatives. But since then, the Twin Cities Pride locally cut ties with them, actually gave back a $50,000 donation. Their stock is down double digits year over year. Foot traffic's been down every quarter. They were just dropped from Fortune magazine's most admired companies list, which they had been on since 2001. And despite doing all of the Trump administration's bidding, they were still sued by 2 MAGA attorney generals, from Florida and Ohio, claiming that their Pride campaign in 2024 hurt stock prices, is what they're alleging. So tomorrow, ICE Out Minnesota, is staging demonstrations at Target stores throughout the metro areas for sit-ins, work-ins, sing-ins, where apparently people will go in and sing, essentially demanding that Target speak out and stop collaborating with ICE Now, Target did join a statement of Minnesota-based Fortune 500 companies issued through the Chamber of Commerce locally here this past Sunday, which was very mealy-mouthed, and they got very raked over the coals for that as well, because it was a statement saying stuff without saying anything. Yeah. But they also joined 28 Fortune 500 companies that donated to a fund that will support local businesses, so they claim, the Minneapolis Foundation. But the 28 Fortune 500 companies only managed to come up with $3.5 million, which, if they all donated equally to this, was about $125,000. Remember, Target gave $1 million.
Yeah, this is a drop in the bucket. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
John Parker, the host of The Gailey Show on KTNF, AM 950 in Minneapolis, St. Paul. John, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too. Always great talking with you. Yeah, happy weekend. Well, on the other side of the break here is Donald Trump building a white supremacist army. Ta-Nehisi Coates thinks so. So do I. I'll be right back with that. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Separated by the Border, a birth mother, a foster mother, and a migrant child's 3,000-mile journey by Gina Thomas. This is from the introduction. How good is your Spanish? And would you be able to take in a 4-year-old girl? She's from Honduras and speaks minimal English. The social worker had texted me on a Friday afternoon. I sat at my desk, bent over my cell phone, reading and rereading the text. My thoughts traveled to Honduras, bachata, ballades, clothes hanging on the line. So many things in our lives seem to have prepared us for this moment. My son was attending a bilingual school. I'm a former ESL teacher, and my husband Andrew and I speak Spanish. Plus, Honduras already had a piece of my heart. As those thoughts came, I tried to push them away. The voice of logic came in loud and strong. We had just gotten into a routine with Emma, our foster daughter. 2 foster children and 2 biological children would be too much for us to handle. Our first month as foster parents taught us this, and for the sake of everyone involved, we knew it would be very unfair to try that again. A little later, the social worker called and left me a message saying, it looks like the Office of Refugee Resettlement, the ORR, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, will get her on Monday in court. It'll only be the weekend. Call me back after you talk to Andrew. I asked Andrew when I got home, we can manage 4 kids for one weekend, right? He said he doubted it would last only a weekend, but I convinced him that if ORR and ICE were involved, they would get her on Monday. A few minutes later, I called our social worker and said that we'd do it. When I walked into the social worker's office, Julia was sitting there in a brand new bright pink Barbie t-shirt. The social worker said they'd found the t-shirt in their clothing closet and Julia wanted it. Beautiful, soft onyx curls framed the girl's umber face. Her dark complexion made me speculate she was from a coastal region. She stood in dirty flip-flops next to the social worker's chair, chit-chatting away in Spanish without a care in the world. Julia's been talking my ear off, the social worker said. She's so sweet, but I have no idea what she's saying. Another worker brought in a black tote bag with a few other items from the clothing closet, including a pair of sequined high-top sneakers that Julia had picked out. I began to speak to Julia, pronounced Julia, in Spanish. She seemed happy to hear her mother tongue, but her body language didn't budge. I read that signal loud and clear, so I kept my distance and sat down on the floor. ¿Cómo se llama? I asked. Julia. ¿Cuántos años tienes? How old are you? 4. She looked older than 4 to me. I had been told her parents were deported and she was left behind.
She was under federal jurisdiction. I would find out later this was all misinformation. I signed some papers and said, we'll see you on Monday. I asked Julia if she would come stay with me and my family for the weekend. She smiled. I told her I had 3 other kids. Her eyes expanded with excitement. On the drive home, she jolted my Spanish from its slumber. The social worker wasn't kidding about how much this little one talked. On April 6, 2018, U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced a new zero-tolerance policy in which the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice would partner for the sake of prosecuting illegal entry into the United States. Sessions said, quote, "If you cross this border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. It's that simple. If you smuggle aliens across our border, then we will prosecute you. If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you, and that child will be separated from you as required by law. If you don't like that, then don't smuggle children over our border," end quote. 6 weeks later, almost 2,000 children had been separated from their parents at the border since the zero-tolerance policy took effect. When Sessions announced the administration's new policy, I couldn't comprehend the cruelty. I also wondered if it explained why a preschooler was living under my roof. Julia had come to live with me and my family in February of 2018, and it felt surreal to be a part of her story. She had first been separated from her mother, Guadalupe, called by her nickname Lupe through the rest of this book, by smugglers who were paid to bring them across the border. Julia had then been separated from her stepfather, Carlos, by U.S. Customs and Border Protection, likely because what was recognized by the Honduran government as stepfather was not recognized by the U.S. government as the same, a detail I didn't understand until an immigration expert read the first draft of this book and explained it. Julia had already suffered much trauma, and separating her from her stepfather had only inflicted more. The weight of the trauma that we, as a nation, began inflicting on vulnerable children and their parents was cruel and unusual punishment. When I heard that my own country was going to begin separating children regularly from their parents as a policy, it broke me. Reality became surreal, and Andrew and I learned to live in it, separating the trauma from our emotions so that we could survive. As the veil of Oz is ever lifting from my white evangelical, what I now see is simply heartbreaking. Government-secured human rights are mostly for privileged white people. Julia is not white. Julia is undocumented. Julia's first language is Spanish. Julia is a girl. These are all labels that set her back in a society made by and for white, passport-holding, English-speaking males. But God, who is neither white nor male, despite my use of the pronoun he, shines his good news on every human being alike. The book is Separated by the Border by Gina Thomas.
We say fight back!
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. Remember back in 2018, Donald Trump was president. It was the second year of his presidency. And the New York Times and ProPublica published his tax returns. They had gotten them from a guy named Charles Littlejohn, who worked for Booz Allen Hamilton, I believe. Yeah, Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a former IRS contractor. It's an accounting firm. And they had access to the Treasury records, and so he pulled out Trump's tax returns, along with Elon Musk's and Jeff Bezos, and made them available to the press. He leaked them to the Wall Street or to the New York Times and ProPublica. And ProPublica and the New York Times both reported, after looking at these documents, that Donald Trump had committed, quote, outright fraud and other, quote, dubious, end quote, schemes to avoid taxation. According to the Times, quote, Donald Trump paid $750 in federal income taxes in 2016, the year he was elected president, and he has not paid any income taxes in 10 of the previous 15 years. So Trump's a tax cheat, right? Well, we all knew that. I mean, he's been convicted of that. But Ron Wyden comes out and says, Donald Trump is a cheat and grifter to his core, and for him to abuse his office in an attempt to steal $10 billion from the American taxpayer is a shameless, disgusting act of corruption. That's what's going on now, is because this guy, Charles Littlejohn, who, by the way, was convicted for this and is serving a 5-year prison sentence for releasing Trump's tax returns. Because the tax returns were released, Donald Trump is now suing himself, essentially. The IRS is part of the executive branch, and he's the head of the executive branch, and he's suing us, the federal government, for $10 billion because we harmed his reputation by revealing that he only paid $750 in income taxes for 2016, and for 10 of the last 15 years paid nothing. His lawsuit says that revealing this, quote, caused plaintiffs reputational and financial harm, public embarrassment, unfairly tarnished their business reputations, portrayed them in a false light, and negatively affected President Donald Trump and other plaintiffs' public standing. No, I would say that as Ron Wyden, my senator here in Oregon, he says his Treasury Department is now flaunting those exact same laws, that's, the privacy around your IRS documents, to send tens of thousands of individual tax records to his anti-immigrant henchmen at ICE. It is the height of hypocrisy. Tim O'Brien, the reporter, he says, Trump oversees the IRS. He wants the IRS to pay him a big chunk of change. He is and always has been in it for the money. Yeah. Meanwhile, Ta-Nehisi Coates is arguing that Donald Trump is building a white supremacist army within the United States government that will last long after Trump is gone. I think this is a very reasonable analysis. He called it, Coates called it armed identity politics. He said the memes, the 1950s stuff, the white supremacist stuff, where I get a New York Times article where the Times reporter calls up and says, hey, this is clearly a white supremacist anthem, and they deny it, and the guy goes and checks it, and they act like he's lying and secretly take it down. But he says this is something new. He says, I've seen before the President of the United States attempt to build what I can only call a white supremacist army that'll outlast him. He says, this is new. I don't know what else to call it. Given the propaganda and the recruiting, I don't know what anybody else would want me to say. Well, I would say, yeah, white supremacist army. That's absolutely what Donald Trump is all about. And turning American cities, or at least blue cities, which is most cities, interestingly, turning American cities into papers, please zones. Lana Zak, writing for CBS News. Some Americans are carrying their passports in Minnesota, writes Lana Zak. CBS News spoke with several people of color, I'm quoting from the report, from several people of color who said they weren't leaving their homes without passports in the events they had to prove their citizenship. Dana, who did not want us to use her last name, said she's making her children carry their passports around because people don't immediately know her background when they look at her. She says, I've been hiding in the house for the past 2 weeks working from home. She says her children have passports. She's now in the process of getting one for herself. And she said she's getting it not because she wants to travel, but because she's afraid. She said, quote, I'm hearing people that are being detained for hours and hours who are U.S. citizens, and that could be me. Another person CBS News interviewed, Alejandra, said, I bring this with me everywhere, holding out her passport. She said, I feel like I'm living in a different world, in a different country, like a dictatorship. It feels really dark and scary, honestly. Yeah, you think? This is that moment that that college professor was talking to Milton Mayer about when he said, you know, this is when you realize suddenly that the forms are all there, but the spirit has changed. That the nation is no longer the nation you thought it was. The majority leader of the Minneapolis City Council is Aisha Chugtai. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, Chughtai, who says, I don't leave the house without my phone, my whistle, and my passport. She adds, I was born in this country. I am a U.S. citizen. I am an elected official. But it is dangerous for anyone in our community to be outside, to be legally observing the actions of federal agents who are indiscriminately arresting and harming community members. And this is the reality of Minneapolis right now. This is the reality of America right now. This is the America that Donald Trump and the white supremacists who surround him and who support him and who brought him to office, and the white supremacist militias who are now joining ICE to be the shock troops, the stormtroopers, the brown shirts and the Sturmabteilung, the SS, that they're all about. I mean, this is their whole shtick. Make America white again. Mawa. And, you know, they might as well wear hats that say, you know, Mawa, because that's the agenda here. Make America white again. Wendy Lawrence, W.A. Lawrence, writing in her newsletter this morning, talking about how women are losing their rights in the United States. They've lost their right to reproductive health care. They're on the verge of losing their right to vote. John Thune just came out and said he's going to push the SAVE Act through the Senate. It's already passed the House of Representatives. The SAVE Act says, and they want to have it in place for this November's election, and nobody's talking about this. It's wild. I've written about it several times, but it's been, I don't know, 5-6 months since I've written about it. I should probably do it again. The SAVE Act says that if your passport or your driver's license does not match your birth certificate, and you have to bring both if you want to vote, then you can't vote if they don't match. And for about 80% of all the married women in America, their passport or their driver's license and their birth certificate have different names on them. I mean, you know, Louisa's driver's license, her last name is Hartmann. On her passport, her last name is Hartmann. On her birth certificate, her last name is her maiden name. Her mother and father's name, not my name. And so under the SAVE Act, she would not be allowed to vote unless she brought with her to the voting office a letter, or, you know, a document from a court showing that she had legally and officially petitioned to change her name. And I don't know, you know, I haven't done a survey, but, you know, I've known a lot of married women through my life, and you know, and their husbands, and I've never heard of anybody going to court to change their names after they got married. I mean, maybe it happens. I know I had a caller when we first started talking about the SAVE Act last year. We had a caller who said that she was going to go to the court and change her name. And I believe she said she had done it. But that's the rare exception. So here we've got an administration that is taking down memorials to black soldiers, that is removing, you know, history, the history of slavery, the history of the oppression of black people in this country, that is elevating white supremacy and white supremacist memes, putting out, you know, Ein Volk, Ein Führer kind of stuff, you know, from the Labor Department, and they're talking about tearing down the murals in the old Social Security building because, you know, hey, that glorifies Social Security, which really should be run by Citibank. It's all about putting white billionaires in charge, white male billionaires, and reducing the role, reducing the visibility of people of color, queer people, and women. That's their agenda. And by the way, this is not unique to the right in the United States. That is the agenda of Putin's Russia, of his party, his Russia First party. That is the explicit agenda of Viktor Orban's party, Fidesz party, in Hungary. That is, this is how the Taliban operates. This is how Sharia, in Trump's beloved Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and Qatar, that's how it works. This is what Trump wants for America.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Or more correctly, this is what MAGA wants for America. And Trump is simply their figurehead. What say you? I'll pick up your calls after the break. And welcome back. Alfredo in Mountain View, California. Hey, Alfredo, what's on your mind today?
Hey, hi, Tom.
Hey.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Thank you for alluding about what's going on in Georgia and the FBI confiscating the voting rolls there. But I wanted to also ask your opinion about this, and I alluded to this before. Blue states need to file amicus briefs on state courts, petitioning the courts to suspend all ICE activities, wherever they are in the states, until this election year is over, because ICE is terrorizing these states and is causing irreparable damage to legitimate voters. That would be the argument. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
I think they're going to be using ICE at the polls in November. I think you're going to see a huge ICE presence at the polls this November. This is very concerning, Alfredo. On the other hand, frankly, if what you are proposing actually happened, it would probably help the Republicans, because it would take the issue of ICE off the front page, and that's driving a lot of the outrage that's getting people to the polls. There was an election last week where the Democratic candidate got 94% of the vote. I mean, it's like, yes, the Democrat was expected to win, but holy cow. So what is the remedy then? I mean, if the courts cannot protect the voters, then what do we do? Well, we have to vote the bums out of office over the short, over the longer term, over the short term. Of course, we go to court and try to stop it. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't stop ICE. We absolutely should. What they're doing, kicking in people's doors without Fourth Amendment warrants, killing people.
And what's to stop the FBI coming to our states and doing what they're doing in Georgia and to steal our votes?
Yeah, well, apparently there's nothing to stop it. I know Mark Elias, Democracy Docket, is all over this.
Yeah. And Mark is great.
Yeah, and he's got a great newsletter, and it's worth supporting. But beyond that, I don't know. Alfredo, thank you for the call. Bruce in Los Angeles. Hey, Bruce, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I just want to share with you something real quick. I don't know if you've seen, all over L.A. there are billboards advertising the Melania movie.
I'm not surprised.
On Jeff
one of these put a lot of money into that.
Right. So on one of these billboards, you could probably find the original online somewhere, but it's a huge black and white photo of Melania sitting in a chair with her head turned towards the camera. And so one of these, which is right on Venice Boulevard, a major thoroughfare, for those who aren't familiar with L.A. at all. Some graffiti artists climbed up there maybe last night or the night before when the billboard went up. And underneath it, again, the photo is all black and white. Underneath the chair, they painted an American flag. Mm-hmm. And then coming down from underneath the chair, in other words, from Melania's seat, is a rain of feces landing on top of the flag.
Yeah, perfect. Just like Trump, when Trump tried to pour liquid feces all over people from a jet in his little AI video. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, and apparently literally nobody is showing up to these movies. Not literally, 2-3 people. All of Europe, maybe a dozen people. Bruce, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So have you noticed that the Republicans are pretty much not talking about a constitutional convention anymore? They used to be gung-ho to rewrite the Constitution. You know, they wanted to put corporate personhood in there. They wanted to change it so that women can't vote. They wanted to do away with the election of senators, repeal the 17th Amendment, take us back to them being appointed by the states. They had all these they wanted to outlaw labor unions, all these weird ideas, but they've stopped talking about it. I mean, they're still moving forward on it, but it's not. Project 2025, for example, you know, their ultimate talking document does not have one single mention in it about a constitutional convention. Why would that be? Well, it's because the Supreme Court is doing their work for them. I mean, you know, just they have overturned Article 2. They've overturned the First, Fourth, Ninth, and 14th Amendments. They've overturned Article 1, Section 7. All the details of this whole thing are over at HartmannReport.com. You got to check it out.
A senator stands with a traitor's tongue, calls us one people, but the song's been sung. Whitewash lies in a blood-soaked frame. He spits on the dead and defiles their names. This is the new Confederacy, wrapped in flags, fueled by hate. They burn the past to chain the future, but freedom won't share their fate.
23 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Andy in Roseville, Minnesota. Hey, Andy, what's up?
Oh, hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call here. I just wanted to share with your listeners something that really struck me this week after watching the taillight kicked out video of Alex Preddy. Mm-hmm. And it ties in with the Saturday incident when I will call he was murdered. Now, on the video on Saturday, what caught my attention with the fire hose of everything that was coming through was the agent that apparently, I'm guessing, allegedly shot into Alex first was wearing Meta AI Ray-Ban sunglasses. Now, when we look and tie that with the incident that happened 11 days-ish, or the one with the taillight being kicked out, you can't tell me that they didn't capture his image. They might have even seen the gun sticking out of the back because there are reports, or at least in that video, you can see that. Now, when you tie all that together, when we bring it back to Saturday, that one agent who came in who wasn't assisting in any sort of arrest of Alex, he came in strategically looking, and then all of a sudden when that gun became visible, disarmed him. Okay? Mm-hmm. My theory here is based on that AI technology that they're using with their sunglasses. And you can see in the Bruce Springsteen video, it's second number 35, them wearing the same thing with Oakley sunglasses that they have that's connected to their phone that ties in with AI. And then the lower third of that sunglass, they can see information. I'd like to know what information did that agent see? What information did that guy with disarmed Alex see? And then after the fact, when that disarmament occurred, they said gun, body cameras were on. Why did they say that? Is that for the body cameras so they can exonerate themselves?
It's the same reason that cops frequently, as they're beating the crap out of people, are yelling, "Stop resisting, as the person is not resisting.
Correct.
But they're doing it for the body camera. Yeah, you're right.
So just wanted to share that. I could be wrong, but
I'm increasingly suspecting that this was an execution, that he had the temerity to kick out the taillight in one of their cars, and they beat him up pretty badly and broke his rib as a result of that. But that they had targeted this guy for execution. Now, I don't have specific evidence for that. Let me just say right up front, this is my opinion. It's a guess. I may well be wrong. but it just seems so skeezy that they got this guy on the ground and put 10 bullets into his back after he was disarmed. Through the whole process, they had his hands, one guy was holding his hands, another two guys were holding his legs. I mean, he was immobilized. He represented no threat to anybody when they put those 10 bullets into his back. This was an execution. So then the question becomes why? Why did they execute this guy? And I want to know who were the guys whose taillight he kicked out, and were any of those guys also the guys who killed him? And I'm willing to, I'm not a betting man generally speaking, but I would bet something, $10, that there is a correlation there, that there is an association. But, I don't think that we're ever going to get an honest investigation out of the feds on this thing, Andy. Hopefully the state will look into it. Andy, I got to run, but thanks for the call. And thanks for listening to us there in Minnesota. 27 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes weekend. I'll pick up your calls here on the other side of the break. Stay with us. It's the Thom Hartmann program, exposing the con in conservative.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. Call 202-808-9925.
Right back with more of your calls in just a moment. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is A History of the World in 6 Plagues, How Contagion, Class, and Captivity Shaped Us from Cholera to COVID-19. Book was published in March of this year. This is from the prologue. I rarely enjoy, and it's by Edna Bonhomme, Bonhomme. I believe that's how it's pronounced. She writes, I rarely enjoy an entire night of rest without interruption. I fixate on the whorls of brass on a light fixture or a stray fly. Like many insomniacs, my angst has an origin story. It began when I was a child and is bound in my memories like a cankerous sore. In the summer of 1988, after nearly a week of high temperatures and perennial diarrhea, my parents, both in their early 20s, took me in desperation to Jackson Memorial Hospital, the same public infirmary in Miami where my mother would later work as a janitor. After a series of tests, I was diagnosed with typhoid fever. I spent a month there at 4 years old, lonely and scared, curled up small in a hospital bed that felt huge. The stale air wafted through my nose while the EKG machine rattled through the night. I heard the buzzing of the fluorescent lights as the stiffness of the bed pressed up against my body. Unable to swallow without feeling nauseous, I could barely eat. According to my aunts and parents, I nearly died. Hyperbole is a familiar register for my elders, their dramatic tales making for entertaining family gatherings. But for once, their alarm at my sluggishness and flushed skin made sense. I was seriously ill. Unmoored from myself with a deep headache, my throat burned and my cough echoed throughout the room. When my relatives visited me, I skulked along the ward corridors, dragging my tiny legs slowly from the bedroom into the playroom. But the worst part was that when the nurses arrived with my favorite fruit, mango, I barely touched the plate. Instead, I glared at them with repulsion and at every other nutrient with irritation as I crumbled into a state of fatigue. What had started as a fever turned into a curse that my miniature body, mind, and spirit could no longer bear. My hospitalization stretched on primarily to get me to a place of health, but also to ensure that I could not infect others. I lost weight. As each day turned into night, I heard the sounds of the nurses as they moved around, shaken. My decline, my high temperature, and eventually my progress were left to the staff. Most of the time, they confined me to the bed in the room, unable to move as I pleased or join the games of my friends who I could see in the playground in my mind's eye. In my confinement, I felt like I was outside of myself. This month of hospitalization has had a life of its own in the years afterward. In the early hours of the morning, as I am laying in bed, the early memories of captivity returns. I am reminded of the waves of tears that flowed down my retina when my parents would leave and the sense of being trapped. When one is bedridden with a life-threatening disease or a chronic illness, one might find oneself obsessed with death. I was too young to understand the cause or nature of my condition, but had a sense that death was something foreboding, a darkness hanging over me. Restless, I craved climbing the coconut tree in our backyard and searching for ladybugs and my cousins. My fear was driven by the conviction that I would not wake up the next time I closed my eyes. More than my parents' embraces and promises of safety muttered in Creole, or the icy ball of the nurse's thermometer, the hospital bed was the most consistent thing I felt. The details of this period are less significant than the impact it created, how 3 decades later I feel irrevocably out of place when entering a hospital. I absorbed the hushed voices, the pastel-colored walls, and the Spartan hospital gowns. I could hear the doctors' voices, but could not understand what they were saying. The syllables rattled through the air, meaningless sounds. Barely able to articulate my thoughts in either Creole or English, I was a callow girl lost in a room of tubes and bright lights, obsessed with my plans to escape. I couldn't see past my hospital bedroom, my mom, in the sense that my restraint was my punishment for pushing a friend off the slide, as I recall doing in my local playground shortly before I was taken ill. All I could do was count the number of times my parents came per day, or the moments the nurses came to feed me. I had no control over anything, what I ate, where I went, when I moved. Even when I imagined playing with my friends at the beach or pictured the sugarcane stalks in our backyard, my thoughts were dimmed by the atmosphere. When others entered the room, even my family, I felt they were surveying me, taking the measure of the bed, the equipment, and my body. Now I find that a bed, even when lying next to a friend or lover, is also a place of unease. Will they disappear in the middle of the night once I'm asleep, or will their presence comfort me? For months after my infection with typhoid fever, I felt the profound injustice of being forced indoors and restrained, unable to feel the humidity, the humid, heavy Miami wind blowing on my face, or watch the luxury sailboats with sunburned passengers splash across the calm water of Biscayne Bay. I learned how to sit still with my thoughts. Even today, hospitals agitate me, not because of their stiff chairs or drab walls or even their bland art, but because of my dread. Medical institutions remind me of my most profound envy for people who can sleep a whole night without interruption or harm. In the late 19th century, typhoid fever was one of the most prevalent diseases in America. When Mary Mallon, popularly known as Typhoid Mary, was identified as the asymptomatic carrier of the disease, physicians believed she had infected families in New York City for whom she cooked. The book is A History of the World in 6 Plagues. Share the Thom Hartmann program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com.
They call me a radical. They shout and they sneer. But I'm fighting for a future that's honest and clear. For the worker, the student, the sick and the poor. For justice and dignity, who could want more? I'm a far left radical, proud and unbound, raising my voice, I'll sing it out loud. For freedom, for fairness, for love, we all know this is the far left radical manifesto.
35 minutes past the hour. Welcome back to the Far Left Radical Manifesto. So what's on your mind today? Mike in Fresno, California. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I've got a theory here. I'd like you to double check me. It appears that political action committees and Citizens United are starving the IRS. And here's my scenario. A billionaire cashes in $1 million worth of stock. He's got to pay $200,000 to the IRS. But if he makes a donation to a political action committee of $500,000, then he gets his money back from the IRS. And
I don't think that's true, Mike. I don't think PAC donations are tax deductible.
Yes. I checked on this. There are hundreds under IRS 527 that are tax deductible. So check out 527.
Yeah, I am
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
Okay, so I just asked ChatGPT. It says short answer: no. Donations to PACs are not tax deductible. Under U.S. law, any contribution meant to influence elections or public policy is excluded from charitable deduction status. That includes political action committees, super PACs, campaign committees, and party organizations. The IRS only allows deductions for 501c3 charitable. It says PACs are usually organized as 527s. That's a political expense, not a charitable one. So, if you're going to give money to like the Heritage Foundation, which then might roll that money into their own PAC, I suppose, that's tax deductible. But giving it to a PAC, no, it's not.
Okay, well, to finish up, in 2008, political action committees only took in $16 million. Right. In 2024, they took in $2.6 billion.
Correct.
And I got some of my information from GPT myself. Okay. So I'll double check my math and I'll catch you another time.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Holly in Washington, D.C. Hey, Holly, what's on your mind today?
Well, it's a little deviation from the immediacy of the moment, which is pretty immediate. But I'm just thinking about the fact that I'm 70 years old and I'm not a great studier of history necessarily. And I still don't know why we're against Cuba, why we're hurting the Cuban people. So what does Gen Z think about it? Like, the 30,000-foot view, how would you explain it to the American heart?
Well, back in the 50s, Cuba was being run by the mafia, and Batista was the dictator, but the mafia and American businesses. I mean, there were casinos down there. The hotel companies had hotels. We had, the big casino companies had casinos. The travel industry was doing well down there. It was a hot property, and Frank Sinatra would go play, Havana, and in '58. But Batista was repressive, if you spoke out against him, you'd get tortured or killed or put in prison. So Castro came in and kicked him out, and then nationalized all of the private property there. So a whole bunch of very, very wealthy people fled Cuba and ended up in Miami, and were adopted essentially by the Republican Party, and they became the people who just drove this whole "you got to hate Cuba" thing, you got to hate Castro thing, because he's a dictator, he's aligned Cuba. Now in '59, Castro came to Washington, D.C. It was his second time in the United States. He'd tried out for Major League Baseball back in the early 50s. He wanted to be a baseball player. No, seriously. Fidel Castro wanted to be a professional baseball player. It's a big thing in Cuba. And so anyhow, he came here in '59 to meet with Nixon, who was vice president at the time, and said, let's work things out. And Nixon said no. Now Nixon was preparing for the 1960 election to run against John Kennedy, and so he wanted to have anti-communist credentials. So he basically told Castro to go screw himself. Castro went back to Cuba and then cut a deal with Russia. And that's how this all happened. Nixon had a golden opportunity to bring Cuba into the fold, and he blew it because he was looking at the next election and he thought that it would work to his advantage. So, that's kind of the genesis story of the whole thing. And then, of course, Nixon, throughout '59 and throughout early '60, as vice president, had the CIA pull together this thing. They called it the Miami, I'm forgetting the phrase now. But down in Miami, the University of Miami or something like that. It was like supposed to be some, cover for it. But they had like 10,000 Cuban refugees down there in Florida who they were training, who had been training separate from the federal government, because they wanted to invade Cuba and kick out Castro and get their property back. These are mostly, wealthy people and their families and their employees. And so Nixon basically appropriated that and created this secret invasion plan for Cuba. that when Nixon, and it was scheduled to go in October of 1960, which would have been, it was going to be an October surprise. It was going to be 4 weeks before the election of 1960. And if Nixon, as vice president, could overthrow Castro, that probably would have won him the election over Kennedy. But there was a huge storm that came through the Caribbean at the time of that, and so they had to postpone it. So Nixon lost the election. Kennedy became president. The CIA operation, the Bay of Pigs operation, was still ongoing. Kennedy had no idea. It was, you know, this was Nixon's plan to co-opt the 1960 election, and so finally the CIA came to Kennedy and said, "We got these 10,000 guys down here in Miami, and if you don't let them go and try to take out Castro, you're going to have a friggin' revolution on your hands. They're going to start fighting against us instead of against Castro." So Kennedy kind of felt like he had his back to the wall and said, "Okay, you do it, but I'm not going to give you the air support you want." And of course, it was a disaster. And you know, and the Republicans and the Nixonistas and you know, all the Marco Rubio's family and all that kind of, all these folks ever since then have been muttering under their breath about Castro and communism and whatnot. But anyhow, that's the whole background story, Holly.
Well, yeah, it's basically imperialism.
Well, yeah, and you know, crass Republican political opportunism, you know, for lack of a better phrase. But yeah, Holly, thanks for the call. It's always nice hearing from you. Appreciate it. Will in Bushkill, Pennsylvania. Hey, Will, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I have a really simple strategy suggestion. It's not profound or anything. It's not brilliant, but I have found it so amazingly effective. It would be so cool if other people could do this. Okay, before I say what it is, and I just want to say, when you do it, it becomes very contagious. I mean, you can see it, remember when you're in school, the old thing, you know, the teacher says, anybody have any questions? And everybody's afraid to answer their question, raise their hand. You know, that's a psychological thing. One person says, yeah, I do. Which I used to do all the time, by the way. And then me too. And then, you know, it's kind of like that.
Right.
But anyway, the deal is in social media, we talking amongst ourselves is okay, but I think it's actually not as effective as going to Republican politicians' pages directly and posting anything you want, but fact-based stuff. You know, you can. I would suggest being never violent, of course, or threatening, but be kind of aggressive because that's the only thing they respect. But facts that the supporters will never ever see anywhere else, and it really is effective. And I know this because I've done it. I've been doing this for years, and I've already had some state senators, Republicans. I literally had one of their attorneys call me and send me a cease and desist letter. I'm not kidding.
Really?
Which I immediately sent to the no, it's true. And I immediately said, it was this bullshit. BS. I'm sorry. I didn't say. I'm sorry. I didn't say the word. Okay. But I sent it to the ACLU of Pennsylvania, and they contacted the center saying this is a violation of the First Amendment. If you continue, we're going to sue you. So that stopped it dead in its tracks.
Interesting.
True story in Pennsylvania, and I'll even say her name.
So when you do this, Will, you identify the account of the politicians. So say it's, you know, at Ro Khanna or something like that. I'm using him to strip this of any political. And I'm assuming you put a dot in front of it so anybody can see it, so it doesn't go like a DM. And so you basically send a message to that person via the social media product, and then you include the data, right? Is that what you're talking about doing?
What I do is similar, not exactly that. I found something even more effective, in my opinion. What I do is I make gifts. You can make free gifts, right? And inside your gift, you put what you want to say and links to prove it. And if I want to say something that Ro Khanna said that, you know, was good, of course. I mean, this just as an example, I would go to a Republican site and say with his information and put it into a gift that blinks, and it makes a big. You can't miss it if you try.
Right.
Billboard and
sure. No, I get it. What program are you using to create the GIFs?
It's called Image. Let me get it. Just hang 1 second. I got it right here. I can tell you. 1 second. In one just second. Yeah, it's really cool. It's completely free. Image Blip. ImageBlip.com. And it's free. Anybody can use it. It's really easy to use, and it's amazingly effective. But that's all. That's my suggestion for today. You know, trying to fight the Nazis here, you know, any way I can.
Yeah, there you go. I like it. ImageBlip.com. Thank you.
Yeah. Check it out. It's very good. Thank you. Bye now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Will. Good talking to you. It's 46 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a minute. It's Anything Goes Weekend. What's on your mind? Advice for dealing with the cons out there? That was a great one from Will. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
This is the place where smart people get their news. Right back with your calls. And welcome back. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, what's on your mind today?
Well, Trump just named a new Fed chairman.
Yeah.
And I suspect it's not going to last because this guy claims that he is against quantitative easing.
Yeah, Kevin Warsh.
So, I don't even want to learn his name because I think it's just a waste of my brain.
Well, Trump nominator said he's going to nominate him on social media this morning.
Yeah, I know.
Did you read Paul Krugman's piece about him?
Pardon?
Did you read Paul Krugman's piece about Kevin Warsh?
No.
Oh, you really
But he
should
claims that
subscribe.
he's against-
Yeah, I mean, you're an economist. You should subscribe to Paul Krugman's Substack newsletter. It's great. He says Warsh is basically a shill for MAGA. He's, and he will do that kind of, he appears to be credible, but Krugman is not buying it. He says, as I write this, many media reports are describing Warsh as a monetary hawk. That's a category error. Warsh is a political animal. He calls for tight money and opposes any attempt to boost the economy when Democrats hold the White House, but not when Republicans do.
Well, if he is legitimate as far as what he says that he believes, he claims he's against quantitative easing, and
during Democratic administrations.
But Trump has been asking for more quantitative easing.
Mm-hmm. So he's in favor of it during Republican administrations, according to Paul Krugman, or at least that's the implication of what Krugman's saying.
I don't find him to be credible. I don't know much about him, but anybody that Donald Trump nominates is going to be a crook. And
by definition,
yeah. And so he's trying to claim that he's against quantitative easing. And in the last 4 weeks, this current Fed, Powell, who claims that he is nonpartisan, he has given us quantitative easing for the last 4 weeks. That's a month. So I think we can start saying that Donald Trump is getting what he's been wishing for.
Yeah.
From Powell.
So Larry, for people who don't know what you're talking about when you say quantitative easing, you want to explain very quickly. You got about a minute here. Explain real quickly what that means and why it only happens when there's a Republican in the White House.
It's basically the Federal Reserve just out of thin air just expands the money supply by trillions of dollars and then gives it to corporations, which makes it also fascism.
Yeah, they use that money to buy stocks and bonds, yeah.
Right. So they basically take the money supply and they mix it into the coffers of corporations, which, like I said, that's fascism.
Mm-hmm.
And so, which is why I'm against it, and I actually think it should be banned and made it illegal in America, because that's the reason why all these major corporations are giving money to Republicans in the political arena. Mm-hmm. Because the Federal Reserve is telling them, hey, if you put a Republican in the White House, we will give you more free money.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like if they ever did that to you, gave you, say, $10 billion and let you keep it for 15 years now. And then they say, oh, but hey, we're going to take it back from you. So they come back and they take 5 of it away.
Mm-hmm.
You still have half of it, and you take that and put it in the stock market, it's already quadrupled in that same time frame.
Sure.
It's really free money that's just multiplying.
No, I totally get it, Larry. I totally get it. And then, when Democrats come in, they do quantitative tightening. They start dumping the stocks and bonds, shrinking the money supply, and throwing the country into recession. Larry, thank you. Brilliant. Thank you, as always. 10 minutes before the hour. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So back in 1933, when Franklin Roosevelt became president, we were in the depths of the Great Depression. He raised the top income tax rate on billionaires from 25% to 90%. The ultra-rich were screaming, and here's what he had to say.
A number of my friends who belong in these very high upper brackets have suggested to me on several occasions of late that if I am re-elected president, they will have to move to some other nation because of high taxes here. Now, I will miss them very much.
He just took it right to them, right? Now, what came out of that was the world's largest and fastest growing and first major middle class. We can do this again. We just have to raise taxes on rich people. It's pretty straightforward. There's a whole article about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
The feed refreshes. The light flickers. A quiet click. And truth dissolves. Scrolling rivers of illusion. Truth and lies in tight collusion. Every heartbeat's just a metric now, while the code decides who we allow. It learns our fear, it feeds our doubt. It keeps us in and locks us out. Is the algorithm humanity's greatest threat? The code forgets what humans don't forget. It don't feel guilt.
So is TikTok still censoring anybody who tries to say something against Trump now that Oracle and Ellison, the Ellison family, play a major role over there? I don't know. I don't know if they've changed their policies or not. I do know a lot of people are leaving TikTok. Anyhow, Sean in Britain, South Dakota. Hey, Sean, what's on your mind today?
Oh, well, earlier in the week, I think it might have been Tuesday, you had a caller in frustration ask, well, say we do sweep the elections and we win back the House and the Senate, what do we do then? And my answer to that is that we start by impeaching members of the Supreme Court.
I like that.
Clarence, I'm sorry, what?
I like that.
Yeah, we start with the Supreme Court. There are at least two very vulnerable members of the Supreme Court that could be impeached and removed. And then
Thomas and Alito.
We go, yep, and Kavanaugh also, because we still don't know who paid off his mortgage.
Yep.
And also, he just blatantly lied under oath to Congress. So, well, I don't know. Was he under oath? Was he under oath during the confirmation hearings?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah. And then we go after the president, and Article 2, am I getting this right? Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution suggests that, says that if the president is impeached for treason, bribery, or high crimes, that his entire administration is removed.
No, it's not. It's not quite that simple.
Okay.
It says the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. What they're saying is that any one of those people, when convicted of treason, can be removed from office. The president, vice president, or any civil officer of the United States. So all they're doing is identifying who's vulnerable, not what happens if one of them gets impeached.
Well, then we'd have to go after all of them.
I don't disagree. I think Pam Bondi, Kristi Noem, I think a bunch of these people are vulnerable to impeachment.
Well, I think the administration knows how vulnerable they are, which is why they can't allow free or fair elections.
Yep.
And I think that's what we're facing.
Yep, I agree. They're
I really hope that they don't push it to a civil war. But if we keep winning elections, if we take the elections in November, somehow, even with the impositions that they put it our way, I think that they will turn to violence.
We've been through this before, Sean. During Reconstruction in the late 1860s, early 1870s, North Carolina, South Carolina ended up with a majority black legislatures as a result of black people getting the vote. And in 1876, when Sam Tilden, the Democrat, ran against Rutherford B. Hayes, the Republican, Tilden actually got more votes, both Electoral College and total number. But there were 3 states where the vote was being contested. And this was the basis, by the way, of Trump's phony electors in 2024. And because of those 3 states, the election got thrown into Congress, and Congress basically cut a deal with Rutherford Hayes where they said, if you stop enforcing Reconstruction, then we'll let you be president. And Hayes did. And that was the end of black power, political power in the South for, 100 years, or close to it. So
we can't let that happen again.
No, but that's the model that they're using. They want to bring back all those same laws and all those same ways of manipulating elections that they started using in 1877 through the 1960s, and it seems like they're doing a lot of it. Sean, I got to run, but thank you for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Vince Houghton's Nuking the Moon and Other Intelligence Schemes and Military Plots Left on the Drawing Board. This is Chapter 7, Operation Northwoods. On April 17, 1961, more than 1,400 Cuban exiles forming the Brigada de Asalto 2506 landed on the beaches of Cuba at Playa Girón in the Bahia de Cojinos, the Bay of Pigs. Their mission was to overthrow the regime of Fidel Castro, Cuba's increasingly communist leader, who had himself overthrown the regime of American ally Batista just 2 years before. A communist leader just 90 miles from Key West was a rather painful thorn in the side of the newly inaugurated President John F. Kennedy, and his ouster was considered a high national security priority, as it had been for Kennedy's predecessor, Dwight Eisenhower. The invasion was backed by the U.S. government and the CIA. We can argue why the Bay of Pigs invasion failed until we're blue in the face, and many people still do. For many in the Cuban exile community, the mission failed because JFK refused to give American naval and air support, elements called in for the original plan developed by the Eisenhower administration. Maybe this is true. The problem here is that we begin to descend into the realm of the counterfactuals, the if-onlys and what-ifs, things that we are doing our damnedest to avoid. Look, I've met a lot of the Cubans who took part in that invasion, many of whom are permanently settled in or around Miami, my hometown. They are impressive men, and I wouldn't put anything past them. If they say they could have kicked out Castro with U.S. naval and air support, who am I to argue? But I still will, because things are much more complicated from an intelligence perspective. Despite the lack of air and naval support, and despite the intensity and desire of the Cuban exile forces, it would have been immeasurably difficult to overcome one of the most problematic aspects of the entire invasion. Castro not only knew they were coming, he knew when and where they were coming. A combination of piss-poor information security, or in today's parlance, InfoSec, with the ability of Cuban intelligence to infiltrate the Miami exile community meant that the secret mission to free Cuba of Castro was anything but secret. It's not like this was a huge surprise for the CIA or the U.S. military. The Cuban intelligence service was very good, and some in the exile community had loose lips. In this environment, it was nearly impossible to conduct effective counterintelligence and keep the invasion secret. Most telling of all, the Soviets had literally broadcast their knowledge of the mission 4 days before it happened. On April 13th, Radio Moscow released an English-language newscast in which they predicted an invasion of Cuba by CIA-trained exiles within the week. It seems they were trying to warn us against carrying out the invasion, a type of deterrence through propaganda. Hey, we know you're coming, so perhaps now is not a good time for your secret operation. Clearly, that didn't work. The blowback from the failed mission was significant on multiple levels. More than 100 members of the 2506 Brigade were killed in combat, along with 4 American volunteer pilots from the Alabama Air National Guard, who were contracted by the CIA. Hundreds more in Cuba would be executed in the days and weeks following the invasion, as Castro eliminated anyone suspected of abetting the exiles. More than 1,200 of the brigade would be captured by the Cuban government, and some of those members were subsequently executed. The Kennedy administration was embarrassed by the failed mission. The U.S. government looked inept in failing to maintain order even in its own backyard. In the zero-sum game of the Cold War, where victory for one of the superpowers was defeat for the other, this was a huge win for the Soviets. Not to mention that the invasion pushed Castro even more firmly into the Soviet sphere of influence. And as far as the strength of the regime was concerned, the Bay of Pigs invasion did the exact opposite of what was intended. It made Castro's regime more powerful than ever before. The operation was a great political victory for the Cubans at home and abroad. Castro was a hero in the eyes of his people for defeating the Yankee invasion and was able to consolidate his power. The fiasco also elevated the Cuban government to a newfound global status, transforming communist Cuba from a grieved little country to an equal in the eyes of the world. In fact, Argentinian physician turned Cuban revolutionary Ernesto Che Guevara actually thanked the United States for the failed invasion. The CIA bore the brunt of the blame for the failed mission. President Kennedy fired CIA Director Allen Dulles, along with Deputy Director Charles Cabell and Deputy Director for Plans Richard M. Bissell, the 3 men who made up the core of the agency's leadership, particularly in the realm of covert action. Kennedy also removed, at least temporarily, major paramilitary operations from the purview of the CIA. For more than a decade, CIA had been the agency with primary responsibility for paramilitary covert operations, but now it was benched. Into the void leapt the U.S. military. In June 1961, about 2 months after the Bay of Pigs, President Kennedy approved National Security Action Memoranda 55, 56, and 57, which codified the shift in paramilitary responsibility from the CIA to the Pentagon. Nothing else really changed. The U.S. government was still looking for ways to oust Castro from power, just through a different government agency. By autumn, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations, Brigadier General Edward Lansdale, a legendary intelligence officer, or infamous, or both, depending on your perspective, was asked to brainstorm ideas to get rid of Fidel. He didn't disappoint. In February 1962, Lansdale provided a document titled Possible Actions to Provoke, Harass, or Disrupt Cuba. Some of the actions are pretty good, some are quite silly, and some are downright abhorrent. The book is Nuking the Moon by Vince Houghton.
We say fight back!
is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. This is pretty amazing. The documents that were just released by the Department of Justice. The folks over at what do you call it, Midas Touch, tracked this one document down. It's on their website right now. It's titled "DOJ just deleted this document from the Epstein files. We saved it." And if you go to MidasPlus.com, you will find it. And it's a U.S. Department of Justice file. It's somewhat redacted, but here are some of the things. Now, what has happened is Midas Touch grabbed this from the millions of documents that or hundreds of thousands, I guess, that Todd Blanche published this morning. They put it in social media, and immediately the Department of Justice deleted it from their own website. So it's no longer available unless you go to Midas Touch and get it off their website at MidasPlus.com. Okay, just FYI. But here's some of the stuff that's in it. Quote, again, this is from the Special Agent Child Exploitation and Human Trafficking Task Force, Federal Bureau of Investigation. And this is from an email August 7th, 2025. That's from like just a few months ago. Quote, blank, redacted, reported an unidentified female friend who was forced to perform oral sex on President Trump approximately 35 years ago in New Jersey. The friend told Alexis she was approximately 13 years old, 14 years old when this occurred, and the friend allegedly bit President Trump while performing oral sex. The friend was allegedly hit in the face after she laughed about biting President Trump. The friend said she was also abused by Epstein. That's one. It's a series of reports, people calling into the FBI. And here's another one. By the way, the response to that was spoke with caller who identified blank as friend. That lead was sent to Washington office to conduct interview. So they took it seriously. Here's another one. At age 16, while modeling, caller attended 8 parties at Epstein's New York residence. Caller named other individuals involved in big orgy parties with her, other young girls, older Victoria's Secret models, including Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. Online complainant reported she was a victim and witness to a sex trafficking ring at the Trump golf course in Rancho Palos Verdes, California, between 95 and 96. Complainant reported Ghislaine Maxwell as the madam and broker for sex parties, clients of whom included Epstein, Robin Leach, and Donald Trump. Complainant reported participating in orgies that some girls went missing, rumored to have been murdered and buried at the facility. Well, that's a little over the top. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Complainant reported being threatened by Trump's head of security that if she ever talked to what went on there or what she saw, she would end up, quote, fertilizer for the back 9 holes like the other C words. Complainant claims to have video of high-profile sex parties, blah-de-blah. And it goes on. I mean, there's a whole bunch. Here's another one. Caller is talking about crimes committed against her. She claims to be a prisoner. She references Lisa Marie Presley, the British royal family, President Trump, and Jeffrey Epstein. There's another one. Complainant reported her neighbor sought modeling gigs at the Trump modeling agency in New York City between 98 and 2000. Complainant reported neighbor allegedly went on cruises set up by a recruiter or head of the agency, and once showed complainant a photo of the recruiter whom complainant recalled looking like Epstein. Complainant reported neighbor was allegedly raped several times during this period. Here's another one. Caller provided information to reference prior civil case from 13 years ago that involved Trump and mentioned Jeffrey Epstein with a minor. Here's another one. Complainant followed up after a call with New York police officer, New York PD officer, regarding her previous tip reporting that she was forced to perform sex acts when she was 13 years old and pregnant in 1984. Complainant also reported that there were high-profile individuals involved in her sex trafficking and the murder and disposal of her newborn daughter. Complainant reported Donald Trump participated regularly in paying money to force her to perform sex acts with him and alleged Trump was present when her uncle murdered her newborn child. It says no contact made. That's pretty wild. Is that the one where they said the baby got thrown off the boat or something? some of this stuff is probably just totally wacky stuff, right? These are complaints. These are not, contacts, people who reached out to the FBI. Donald Trump, here's another one. Donald Trump, the president, had parties at Mar-a-Lago called Calendar Girls. Jeffrey Epstein would bring the children in and Trump would auction them off. He measured the children's vaginas by inserting a finger and rated the children on tightness. The guests were elder men, including Elon Musk, Donald Trump Jr. Well, I don't know. You know, some of this is like, could this even possibly be true? And Eric Trump were there. Attorney Alan Dershowitz was also there with attorney Bob Shapiro. They were taken in rooms, forced to give oral sex to Donald Trump. I mean, I'm going to stop here because, you know, a lot of this stuff is probably just, you know, crank calls to the FBI. So, you know, I just don't know what to do with this other than, you know, share it with you. And you can read it yourself. Like I said, just go over to MidasPlus.com. And, you know, the DOJ just deleted this document from the Epstein files. We saved it. So, you know, wild stuff. Meanwhile, Mark Carney took a stand the rest of the world must take now. This is Bryn Tannehill writing for the New Republic. And Bryn writes, first they killed a disarmed man in cold blood. Afterwards, the administration issued bald-faced lies about what would happen while taking the line that no one would get hurt if everyone simply stopped protesting or resisting. The Trump administration has given the same mafioso ultimatum to Canada. So at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney got up and gave just a barn burner of a speech. He got like a 2-minute standing ovation. He said, he called Trump a hegemon, and he said this bargain no longer works. He cited Václav Havel, the fellow who became the president of Czechoslovakia after the Soviet Union fell, who talked about how systems that work, you know, based on fear can't be sustained. Compliance in advance, people refusing to contradict what's clearly a lie. He said that kind of a system crumbles when the first person refuses to go along with the lie. This is the little boy said the emperor had no clothes syndrome, right, or effect. And Trump responded, you know, they call it the bystander effect. Trump responded to Carney with his typical petulance, writes Bryn Tannehill. On Truth Social, he noted that Canada was no longer invited to the Board of Peace that he had created, where you have to give Donald Trump $1 billion and then he'll let you be a part of his phony UN. But this is a big deal for Canada. I mean, our economies are heavily integrated. Canada is our second largest trading partner. It accounts for 70% of all Canadian imports to the United States. Accounts for 70% of all Canadian imports. You can spend up to 180 days in either country without, you know, you don't need visas and things. NORAD is a joint U.S.-Canadian command. We have a shared airspace agreement. But he writes, this is like an abused spouse deciding to leave a relationship, even if it means temporary hardship and poverty. It is not done on a whim. And Carney appears to be reaching out to the EU and saying, you know, maybe Canada could become part of the European Union. Increasingly, what it's looking like to me, and we talked about this some yesterday when I went off on this rant about, you know, economics and the macroeconomic damage that Donald Trump is doing to the United States with his, you know, pathetic and you know, man-child tantrums, you know, throwing tariffs around, trying to get countries to give him a new hotel, give him a new golf course, you know, and then we'll diminish the tariffs and all this kind of stuff. But the GDP of the EU is about the same as the United States. So 88%. Yeah, 88% of all global foreign exchange transactions right now are in dollars, 58% of foreign reserve currency holdings. So shifting away from the dollar to the euro for Canada would be a huge big deal. And it would be catastrophic to the U.S. economy. He notes, in 1938, the strongest nation opposed to Hitler accepted a disgraceful surrender to the bullying monster. When history is written, he writes, I believe this statement by Mark Carney in moving Canada away from the United States, this may be remembered as the anti-Chamberlain moment, a leader of a relatively powerless nation throwing down the gauntlet and proposing to the democracies of the world that they band together as a unified front against a juvenile, narcissistic would-be hegemon who has never been effectively stood up to in his entire pampered life. The U.S., he writes, is likely to learn a hard lesson economically. And that's the point that I was making yesterday. I think, you know, I just don't see how the Trump presidency works out well for the United States, given all the things he's doing, his tariffs, his politicizing the Fed, his turning American cities into police states, your papers, please, killing civilians in the streets, throwing people into long-term imprisonment with no criminal charges against them whatsoever. It's just wild stuff. So, keep an eye on this thing. And, I can't give you investment advice. I've always been very bad at that myself, but something evil this way comes, I think, is probably a good summary. 16 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with your calls. What's on your mind? It's Anything Goes Weekend right after this. Stay with us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the True People's Media. Right back with your calls in just a minute. And welcome back, Patsy in Arroyo Grande, California. Hey, Patsy, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I'm sort of into a conspiracy theory. It's maybe even a little far-fetched, but my mind keeps going back to it. Don Lemon, when he was on CNN, used to interview Michael Falone, one of the Capitol Hills police that got terrorized.
Falone was actually a D.C. Metro cop, but he showed up and volunteered to help out at the Capitol building. Yeah.
Right. So the thing is, Michael Falone was at the, was it Jack Smith hearing the other day, and he kind of got into a little brouhaha with somebody. But, I was thinking, he's kind of got some Teflon on him, but they don't want to go after him directly. But I think people like Don Lemon, who are associated with people like that, are probably being taken down for that reason. Mm-hmm. Like I'm thinking Nancy Pelosi has that daughter who does,
Alexandria.
Right, she does documentaries. Yeah, she's a filmmaker, does documentaries. Mm-hmm. They could go after her, although she's keeping a low profile. And I don't know. I'm just dumping this in your lap. What do you think?
I'm not sure exactly what your question is.
Like I said, it's my conspiracy theory that they're going to be going, if they can't get the person they want to get that's involved in that, all these people that were involved in January 6th, like Adam Schiff and, so on, that, have gone after the Trump administration because of January 6th, that they might try to get people who are adjacent to them, who are vulnerable.
I don't think it's that complicated. I think that anybody who speaks out against this administration is a potential target. Particularly if they're high profile, if they appear on TV a lot, if they, if they're affiliated with the Democratic Party, if they're elected officials, if they have spoken out against Trump in a way that actually he believes has hurt him, they're going to come after them. And the hope, they're not actually, in my opinion, I don't think they're actually trying to send Don Lemon to prison. What they're trying to do is force him to spend a couple $100,000 on lawyers. They're trying to break him financially now that he no longer has a network behind him, and he's going to have to pay for for his lawyers out of his own pocket. And that is how Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin destroyed the free press in Hungary and Russia, respectively.
Oh, so it is one of their tactics.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is tried and true. Goes way back, and Trump has been doing this to people he doesn't like for most of his life. Suing them for libel or suing them for slander or whatever. So it seems to me like this is just kind of, standard operating system is, go after the media. And I think that, this Don Lemon thing, it'll be interesting to see if like the White House Correspondents Association, if the, any of the associations, there's the Columbia Journalism School has an association of journalists. I forget the name of it. But there's a couple of fairly high-profile groups of reporters and journalists, and I'm guessing Don Lemon is probably a member of at least one of them. If any of them are going to stand up and say, this is an assault on the First Amendment. This is an assault on the free press of America. They want the press to be owned by their billionaire buddies, and any part of it that is not owned by their billionaire buddies and is not singing the praises of Donald Trump all the time, like CBS does now, like Fox does always, like, One American News, et cetera. Anybody who doesn't do that is a target. So those are my thoughts on it, Patsy. And Patsy, thank you very much for the call. It's 21 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. A lot of people wonder, where did this whole right-wing movement to basically gut our freedoms and end DEI and all this other, where did this all begin? It all started back in 1951 with a book called The Conservative Mind, From Burke to Eliot by Russell Kirk. And he argued that if the middle class ever got too big, you'd see young people and women and racial minorities all get up on their hind feet and start protesting and basically screwing up America. And in the 50s, even Republicans thought he was nuts. But then the 60s happened and all those protests, and suddenly Republicans thought, yeah, he's right. We've got to destroy the middle class, or at least cut it back. And that was Reagan's mandate when he came into office in 1981. There's a whole article about this. You can read all the details. It's titled The GOP's 60-Year Conspiracy to Kill Our Democracy. None dare call it treason, but I will. Over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Well, I woke up this morning, turned on my screen, saw Trump and Musk in a Twitter war scene. One said, I bought the Senate. The other said, so I bought the man who runs your favorite show. They're punching and posting and flexing their might while the rest of us wonder who shut off the light. Democracy's wheezing in a billionaire fog as Justice Roberts walks his billionaire dog. Who owns America? Is it Bezos, Musk, or Vlad? Who bought the Constitution with a platinum Amex pad? It ain't we the people, that ship's in distress. It's a yacht club cage match in a democracy mess. Oh, say, can you see? We've been repossessed.
23 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Bill in Morgantown, Indiana. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Tom, fairly belated. Happy New Year. It's the first time I've called this year.
Well, thank you, Bill. I'm having a hard time hearing you. If you could get your mouth right next to the microphone, it would help.
Can you hear me now? Is that
yes,
better?
Yes, sir. It's a whole lot better.
Okay. I talked to several of my friends in Richmond, since I left Virginia, and not about anything particular, just the holidays and whatnot. But Doug Wilder, our former governor, wrote an op-ed in the Richmond paper today, and I'll kind of categorize what it says. The previous governor, Youngkin, left Virginia with a $2 billion budget surplus. And Wilder, who helped create this rainy day fund as a fallback, is fully funded now with $400 million. Why did the Virginia General Assembly decide to raise taxes? And I'll tell you what they're on. They're all regressive. They're on things like if you walk your dog, dry cleaning, landscaping, all of a sudden a tax on Amazon, Uber Eats, FedEx. Why would you raise any tax if you've got a $2 billion surplus?
Bill, I can't answer your question. I don't know anything about the circumstances you're talking about, or frankly, I don't know much about the politics of Virginia. So I just don't know.
Well, it's not so much this, but
I would guess that they've got something that they want to do that's bigger than what's being done. I mean, you've got some states that are looking at trying to expand their health care programs. They want to expand Medicaid now that the Trump administration has cut $1 trillion out of Medicaid. Individual states are looking at saying, instead of kicking people off the Medicaid rolls, thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands of people, that they're going to raise their local taxes and pay for it out of state funds. That's a possibility. It could have to do with trying to, make the state colleges, universities, or junior colleges, or whatever you call them, the regional colleges, free. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. If I was a legislator, I mean, I can think of a lot of things that I would do with, a tax increase, but I just don't know, Bill.
Well, the thing I'm trying to say, though, is this, because since it came from Governor Wilder, who I voted for happily back in 1990, and the reason why he was such a good governor was, back when he became governor, the state was almost out of money, bankrupt. Mm-hmm. He didn't raise any taxes. He just cut spending. The state employed, and he is, a civil rights icon.
Yeah.
But he's also a pragmatic person.
Mm-hmm.
And this brings in something that I think happens on the national level. Somebody gets elected, let's say 2020 with Biden. And I still say President Biden, people my age thought of him back when he was more of a moderate, like I said, I'm not calling him, he was moderate. Mm-hmm. He was middle of the road like a lot of people were in the Senate. He gets in and all these programs come out, all this social programs come out.
Yeah. Yeah, which got us out of our recession.
Yeah, but here's the problem, though, Tom. They read the press clippings, whatever policy it is, and within 4 years, they've given the other side enough reason to get voted out.
No, I get that, Bill. I don't think it's that simple, but I'm sorry I'm out of time. Bill, thank you for the call. 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's Talk Media for the sane among us. We'll be right back with your calls. Today we're reading from Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. This is an 1856 first English translation edition of this author, but you can still get it online, and a lot of different booksellers sell it. This is from Chapter 11. What sort of despotism democratic nations have to fear? I had remarked during my stay in the United States that a democratic state of society, similar to that of the Americans, might offer singular facilities for the establishment of despotism. And I perceived, upon my return to Europe, how much use had already been made by most of our rulers of the notions, the sentiments, and the wants engendered by this same social condition for the purpose of extending the circle of their power. This led me to think that the nations of Christendom would perhaps eventually undergo some sort of oppression like that which hung over several of the nations of the ancient world. But it would seem that if despotism were to be established among the democratic nations of our days, it might assume a different character, different from the Roman Empire, for example. It might be more extensive and more mild. It would degrade men without tormenting them. I do not question that in an age of instruction and equality like our own, sovereigns might more easily succeed in collecting all political power into their own hands, and might interfere more habitually and decidedly within the circle of private interests than any sovereign of antiquity ever could do. But the same principle of equality which facilitates despotism tempers its rigor. When no member of the community has much power or much wealth, tyranny is, as it were, without opportunities or a field of action. As all fortunes are scanty, the passions of men are naturally circumscribed, their imagination limited, their pleasures simple. This universal moderation moderates the sovereign himself and checks within certain limits the inordinate stretch of his own desires. Independently of these reasons, drawn from the nature of the state of society itself, I might add many others arising from causes beyond my subject, but I shall keep within the limits I have laid down to myself. Democratic governments may become violent and even cruel at certain periods of extreme effervescence or of great danger. Excuse me, think of George Bush in 9/11. But these crises will be rare and brief. When I consider the petty passions of our contemporaries, the mildness of their manners, the extent of their education, the purity of their religion, the gentleness of their morality, their regular and industrious habits, and the restraint with which they almost all observe in their vices, no less than in their virtues, I have no fear that they will meet with tyrants in their rulers, but rather guardians. I think then that the species of oppression by which democratic nations are menaced is unlike anything that ever existed before in our world. Our contemporaries will find no prototype of it in their memories. I am trying myself to choose an expression which will accurately convey the whole of the idea I have formed of it, but in vain. The old words, despotism and tyranny, are inappropriate. The thing itself is new, and since I cannot name it,
I must attempt to define it. I seek to trace the novel features under which despotism may appear in the world. The first thing that strikes the observation is an immutable multitude of men, all equal and alike, incessantly endeavoring to procure the petty and paltry pleasures with which they glut their lives. Think now of a television society. Each of them, living apart, is as a stranger to the fate of all the rest. His children and his private friends constitute to him the whole of mankind. As for the rest of his fellow citizens, he is close to them, but he sees them not. He touches them, but he feels them not. He exists, but in himself and for himself alone. And if his kindred still remain to him, he may be said at any rate to have lost his country. Above this race of men stands an immense and tutelary power, which takes upon itself alone to secure their gratifications and to watch over their fate. Facebook? That power is absolute, minute, regular, provident, and mild. It would be like the authority of a parent if, like that authority, its object was to prepare men for manhood, but it seeks, on the contrary, to keep them in perpetual childhood. It is well content that people should rejoice, providing that they think of nothing but rejoicing. For their happiness, such a government willingly labors, but it chooses to be the sole agent and only arbiter of that happiness. It provides for their security, foresees and supplies their necessities, facilitates their pleasures, manages their principal concerns, directs their industry, regulates the descent of property, and subdivides their inheritances. What remains but to spare them all the care of thinking and all the trouble of living? Thus, it every day renders the exercise of the free agency of man less useful and less frequent. It circumscribes the will within a narrower range and gradually robs a man of all the uses of himself. The principle of equality has prepared men for these things. It has predisposed men to endure them and oftentimes to look on them as benefits. I have always thought that the servitude of the regular, quiet, and gentle kind, which I have just described, might be combined more easily than is commonly believed with some of the outward forms of freedom, and that it might even establish itself under the wing of the sovereign of the people. Our contemporaries are constantly excited by two conflicting passions. They want to be led, and they wish to remain free. As they cannot destroy either one or the other of these contrary propensities, they strive to satisfy them both at once. They devise a sole, tutelary, and all-powerful form of government, but elected by the people. They combine the principle of centralization and that of popular sovereignty. This gives them a respite. They console themselves for being in tutelage by the reflection that they have chosen their own guardians. And it continues. It's a brilliant book. A Democracy in America by de Tocqueville.
Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio, and tag you're it. So MAGA Mike and the Republicans want a religious test for people running for public office. They want to know that you are sufficiently Christian to be worthy of being elected. Right. MAGA Mike is one of these 7 mountain evangelicals. There are 7 domains where these dominionists believe that we need to have religion completely take them over. Education, religion, family, business, government and military, arts and entertainment, and the media. Seriously. This is not what Jesus was preaching when he said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto God what is God's. This is the opposite, in fact, of what Jesus was teaching. It's the opposite of Matthew 25, where Jesus said the only way to get to heaven is by feeding the hungry, healing the sick, helping the poor. This is counter-Christian, anti-Christian, in fact. In fact, I think you could say it is the Antichrist's work. There's a piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
It didn't fall in a single night. No tyrant stormed the gate. It came by silence and stage light lies, and rage repackaged his fate. Each step so small we barely stirred. Too slow to fear or flee, we clung to forms and hollow words. We thought we were free. One by one the guardrails bent, crowd just shrugged and stared. The crimes became the government, and no one really cared. He caged the child, he praised the strong. He mocked our liberty, we called it news, then moved along. We thought we were free. Now the echoes sound like history, but this ain't black and white TV. It's flesh and blood and cowardice and what we let become routine. They called us safe, they called us brave, while killing truth in every screen. We thought we were free, but freedom doesn't come passively. The judge was threatened, no one flinched. The mob wore suits and ties. He promised power unchecked and clenched, and still we compromised. The loyalists drew up the plans to purge the civil tree. We watched it happen, hands in hands. We thought we were free.
37 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Dave in Buffalo, New York. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hello, Tom. Thank you. I have a video and a picture about the murder for Alex Petrie. But before that, on the break, there was a book about where did the war culture come from. I have an answer, a proposal, or suggestion on where war and war culture, how did it evolve in society, and I believe I have the answer to that. And the answer is this. We evolved using magic mushrooms and magic elixirs, but the side effect of magic mushrooms and such things like that are an antidepressant. And in the New England Journal of Medicine, a single dose of psilocybin can relieve depression up to 3 months. Current antidepressants take multiple times a day and don't miss a dose. And so we had this installed in us, in our nature, and we were having issues. We would go back in the day. We would be ingesting this, and it would just be in our nature and our nature. And then Christianity came in and cut off the use of magic elixirs and magic mushrooms, and then the eye-to-eye facial recognition, which leads to contentment, happiness, and contentment. But it's death. Religion is a death cult, and that's where it all comes in to
Dave,
play.
you're singing Terence McKenna's song. Are you familiar with Terence McKenna's work back in the 70s, 60s and 70s?
I have no idea. No, but this
Terence McKenna came up with this theory that the reason that our brains started really expanding rapidly as we moved from Lucy to Homo sapiens, from Homo habilis to Homo sapiens, was because we were taking magic mushrooms. We were taking plants, peyote, mushrooms and whatnot, that expanded our brains basically, and that we co-evolved with these things, and that's why we're drawn to them, and that's why they work so well for us.
Flying reindeer from the Charmin collecting snow.
Oh yeah,
Scandinavia.
Yep.
But the video I have is from Joe Walsh's Instagram, and it has and I posted it on your Threads account from 4 days ago. I couldn't recopy it perfectly because Threads wouldn't let me do it, so I had to do it my way. But the video shows of the killing, execution, murder of Alex. It's clear. He's on all fours. There's 3 circles. There's a blue circle in all the activity. There's 3 people that are mostly involved. The man that removes the gun, which is on his left side because I see him doggy style, Alex. And there's a gentleman, ICE agent, on his left side that removes the gun. The gentleman, ICE agent on my side, which I see his back, he's on the ground next to him.
We've all seen it, Dave. What's your point?
It's an execution, but it's perfectly clear. But it's in his holster, and the gentleman that shows it, and then there's an orange circle. And what happens is the gun comes out, the gun comes across the eye path. Actually, the gun, the gentleman that shoots him His hand is on his holster, on the gun, on the trigger, and he waits until he pauses until the gun goes. Actually, his left hand, the guy that shoots.
Oh, I know. They didn't kill Alex Preddy until after they disarmed him. I mean, everybody gets that. The big question is, did they track him down and murder him because a week earlier he had kicked out the taillight of one of their cars? Or was this just another, ICE killing a civilian? I don't know. Dave, I got to move along. Thanks for the call. Pat in LaPorte, Indiana. Hey, Pat, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Tom. I, like many seniors, ignored some mail during the holidays because I was busy. I opened it last week, and I find from Medicare that I was charged 6 different months in 2025 for urinary catheters, and a doctor was assigned to that urinary catheter who I had never visited. So
this
immediately,
is Medicare fraud.
Yeah. So I called the doctor's office, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of, who he prescribed these for. Mm-hmm. And then I called Medicare. The doctor's office blew me off. They said, It happens to everybody.
Right.
So
the doctor's office might be
Medicare.
the people who are doing the fraud.
Well, I called Medicare, and I said, I told them what happened. I got on immediately. I mean, I didn't have any wait at all. The phone rang like 5 times, bingo. And, they identified it as fraud. They recommended that I apply for a new Medicare number. Mm-hmm. So I went ahead and did that. But I just thought I would get this out there for your audience because I know probably a lot of people are like me on Medicare. And, really check your statements because I never dreamt that my Medicare number would be, compromised. But I guess Doge got into a lot of different places.
Well, Doge has all those databases. They have all our Social Security information, which includes all our Medicare information. So, and God only knows what's Elon Musk's how many people his teenagers have sold that stuff to. Thank you, Pat.
Right.
You just did a public service.
A second thing I wanted to say real quickly is Miles Taylor, former student. I taught him at LaPorte High School.
Oh, really?
Standout. Yeah. Absolute standout. And I am so grateful that you've had him on the show because I often wondered, when you get those brilliant kids in class, you often wonder, what happens to them when they grow up, Yeah. And it was just, I couldn't believe when I looked him up on Wikipedia that he was the same Miles Taylor, that, you could see remnants of his childhood in his face when he was on your show, but it was just so cool to see him being, so successful.
What a great story, Pat. What a great story. So next time I have him on, I'll try to remember to pass along your greetings.
Oh, yeah, he was an absolute wonder, and it was just great to see that he's involved. Sad that he was a Republican, but okay, I'll take it.
Yeah, he's a reformed Republican now.
Yes, reformed. Thanks, Tom. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, you too. 44 minutes and a half, more or less, past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a minute. Stay tuned. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. The place where despair is not an option. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
I'll be right back with your calls. It's Anything Goes Weekend. What's on your mind? And welcome back. Terry in Seattle. Hey, Terry, what's on your mind today?
Hi, good morning. Greetings from rainy Seattle.
Oh, thank you.
I heard you speaking earlier this morning about the SAVE Act, and I'm calling in because I am a married woman who recently went through the process of legally changing her name, and I can tell you about the process.
Okay, I'm listening.
This happened in October of 2023, and it wasn't obviously for purposes of voter registration. I was in the process of getting citizenship in a foreign country, and they're sticklers about your name and the paperwork, and it took about half a day and approximately $325.
To show up at a courthouse and change your name legally.
Yes, I had to go to 2 courthouses because I approached one. I went to one to file a petition, and they seek out a court date and a location, and I wanted to get it taken care of that day, and I couldn't do it at that courthouse. I had to go to a different jurisdiction, so that required me, waiting and then moving and then appearing and talking to the judge. So that was my experience. I'm sure the cost varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but it takes time and money.
Yeah, well, and that's the point. Republicans always try to make voting difficult or expensive because, that's the basis of the ID laws, because they know that the poorer you are, the more likely you are to vote for a Democrat. And so, they want wealthy white people voting, not anybody else. But that's remarkable. So I don't know how many married women there are in the United States. I should ask, one of the chat programs or one of the AI programs. But I'm guessing it's, 70, 80, 90 million, something like that. I mean, there's got to be a lot of married women in the United States who have taken their husband's name. It's just wild that they're going to do this. So, Terry, thank you. Thanks for sharing that with us. I appreciate it.
No problem.
It's great talking to you. Thank you. Jake in Seattle. Hey, Jake, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Well, there's a lot of depressing news out there, but how about a little bit of humor for you?
Okay, I'll take it.
All right, this is a great joke I heard a couple weeks ago, and you can tell it to anybody, even our conservative brothers and sisters out there. So guy walks into a bookstore. He's looking around. The bookseller says, "Oh, sir, can I help you with anything?" He says, Yeah, I'm looking for the new book by President Trump. You know, the one about getting all the immigrants out of the country? And the bookseller's face turns red, puffs up their chest, and says, "You SOB, get the heck out of here, and don't you ever come back." The guy goes, Yeah, do you have it in paperback? Have a good weekend, Tom. Thanks.
Thank you, Jake. Oh, geez. Brad in Okemos, Michigan. Hey, Brad, do you have a quick one here? I've got about a minute.
Okay, so 100 years ago or so, Benito Mussolini, a convicted deserter, formed his own secret police. So it's called the OVRA, OVRA.
Yep.
This is an organization for vigilance and repression of anti-fascism.
Yep.
Anyone opposed to El Duce and fascism were arrested for, quote, opposition criminals.
Yep.
So here in America, those protesting around the country are being labeled as opposition criminals.
Oh, interesting. So
And
they're literally
if you wanna
lifting
know how-
language from Mussolini.
If you want to know how bad it can get, look up OVRA.
OVRA.
The secret police.
I'll do it. Brad, thank you. Thank you very much for that.
You bet.
I appreciate the tip. 48 minutes past the hour. I'll be right back with you. Stay tuned. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. When I was a little kid, my grandmother had a piano and I loved to play it. I was incompetent, but I was figuring out all kinds of stuff. And then I kind of got away from it and, went to school and things got busy and just lost track of it. Well, now there's this fascinating new study out of the University of Geneva, Switzerland, that is making me think maybe I should go back and learn the piano. What they found was that they took a group of 132 healthy older adults, retired, 62 to 78 years old. Half of them learned the piano, half of them took music classes without learning the piano. And what they found was that those who learned the piano actually had the strongest increase in their memory, in their mental competence, their mental faculties. Those who took the music classes also did well, but learning the piano was a huge step. So check it out. There's a whole long rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Welcome back. 9 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, how are you doing, Tom? Happy Friday. Lots of great calls today. And your intro and Hartmann report about little 5-year-old Liam Ramos is what I would call the battle for the soul of America. Is this the kind of society we want to live in?
Agreed.
And then the arrest of Don Lemon and the ICE invasion of Minnesota is what I would call the battle for the beating heart of democracy. And M. Gesson had a brilliant op-ed in the New York Times last weekend titled "State Terror Has Arrived," detailing how the randomness of the terror is what keeps people silent and fearful. And in my opinion, that's why the organized resistance in Minneapolis is so inspiring. It's a template for how we defend our democracy everywhere. But finally, Tom, Jake Johnson at Common Dreams had a piece yesterday covering how progressives are concerned about Chuck Schumer possibly waffling again on demands for DHS funding. Mm-hmm. I'm with Ro Khanna and his demands, which I can run by you, but your thoughts first?
I'm initially, when I heard that they were cutting a deal with the administration, with the Republicans, I thought, oh God, here we go again. But when you look at it, it's actually what Schumer's doing. I think is actually pretty slick. It's pretty smart. They've worked out, and the Republicans were opposed to it, by the way, in Congress. He cut this deal with the White House, and that is that they're taking the ICE funding out. Now, ICE is going to continue no matter what, even if the government shuts down, because the big beautiful bill gave them $14 billion, or maybe it was more than that, and so it appropriated without the appropriations process. So this is additional money that they're talking about giving to them right now. And so it pulls that out and says, we'll give us 2 weeks to work this out. And I think that there's enough Republicans who are horrified by what's going on with ICE that there's a chance that these Democrats will succeed. What say you, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, well, the concern, I guess, with progressives over Schumer is that, maybe if things cool off in these 2 weeks, that he's not going to demand enough and use the leverage that we have now.
That's always the concern with Schumer.
But 2 weeks isn't that long of a time. So, I'm not that concerned about that as much as just is he demanding enough? And, Ro Khanna is demanding to repeal the multi-year $75 billion in funding for ICE and to end qualified immunity for ICE agents, to investigate and prosecute every ICE agent who has broken the law, to impeach Noam Bondi, and to end the Kavanaugh stops and codify use of force standards, and finally to tear down and replace ICE with a new agency that has oversight. So I think we all should be calling our senators and telling them to endorse Ro Khanna's demand.
I agree, and I have no objection to that. But I can tell you that will be a bridge way too far to get any Republican support. So there's no chance it's going to make legislative history, that it's going to get passed. What you're describing,
right? Yeah, but,
I'm always in favor of shoot for the moon and settle for less than the moon. But let's just be clear-eyed here, Jeff.
Sure. All right, Tom. Thanks for all you do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you,
Jeff. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Mark in Sauk City, Wisconsin. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And as the previous caller on the SAVE Act, I would posit that it's a violation of the 24th Amendment because it creates a poll tax because there's an expense for that to happen. Probably a violation of the 19th Amendment.
That argument has already been made before the Supreme Court with regard to voter ID, and they've rejected it.
Well, I'd say this is, I'd remake the argument, but also it's a violation of the 19th Amendment because the societal convention in this country is that women change their name when they get married, and for that, add that extra burden on them for them to, simply because they're a woman, they have to go through that extra step. Right. And then since women are not property in this country, it's a violation of the 13th Amendment because that 13th Amendment abandoned or banned ownership of our fellow human beings.
Well, give them another year or two. They'll get us there to where women are property again.
And for Mike Johnson to ignore the Constitution, which explicitly bans any kind of religious tests, it shows his complete ignorance and his unqualification to serve in the Congress because he's completely violating his oath to the Constitution there because it's explicit in the Constitution, U.S. Constitution, and also probably in the state Constitution that there's a ban on any kind of religious test.
I agree. I think he's been reading way too much David Barton. These guys who just literally make up quotes and attribute them to the founders that suggest that America is a Christian country. Great points all, Mark. Thank you very much for that. Patricia in Wooddale, Illinois. Hey, Patricia, you have the last minute. What's up?
Hi, Tom. I'm calling to comment on the previous Pat's phone call where she was talking about the fraudulent charges on her Medicare. I just want to say, and I definitely don't want to defend Elon Musk, but that's nothing new. About 2 years ago, that happened on my husband's Medicare summary. And I immediately called Medicare. They thanked me for calling and said, yes, this is fraudulent. We get a lot of these. We'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. They didn't tell me to change my number, but apparently this has been going on for a while with the catheters.
Oh, it's been going on for decades. This kind of Medicaid fraud, or Medicare fraud, rather.
Right, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it is, and it's also something that Republicans for a long, long time have been trying to use as an excuse to gut Medicare. I mean, they love the word fraud. That's their all-purpose word. If they want to stop you from voting, or if they want to stop you from using Medicare or whatever. So, beware.
Yep,
so,
that's for sure.
Patricia,
check
thanks a lot for the call.
All the time.
There you go.
You're
yes,
welcome.
Check those summaries. Thank you. Another public service announcement from one of our brilliant listeners. Thank you. Hey, special thanks to Louise Hartmann, Sean Taylor, Jamie Hawley, Nigel Peacock, student advocate Patrick Hoyt, Geraldine Halbert, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, Jeremy Peterson, Connor Arroyo, Carna Verde, Martha Salinas, Josiah Wester, Mateo Robertson, Diane Russell, and Ruben Michaels, all the fine people who work on this program. And thank you to you for watching, listening, participating, sharing with your friends, letting our advertisers and nonprofit stations know you're listening. Thank you. Get out there, get active, tag you're it. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll catch up with you on Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.